9 o'clock. Let's call the meeting to order. Currently, it looks like Rich is the only one that's not here this morning. Jerry, if you'll go ahead and annotate that. Approval of the March 12th, 2018 minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review those? And if so, are there any corrections? And if not, then I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Second?
Motion is second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? Motion carries. Today's agenda, approval of our agenda. I'd entertain a motion to approve today's agenda that we have before us, unless there's any additions or changes that we want to make beforehand.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. PJ for the consent agenda. For those who are here in the audience, if you would like to get an agenda, they're back on the back bookshelf on the back wall if you would like an agenda to see what's on our consent calendar and our regular agenda. All right, PJ, thank you very much.
BJ Conover, Director, Planning Department, Consent Agenda. The following items have been placed on the consent agenda for action to be taken on all items in accordance with staff's recommendation by a single vote. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda by any planning commissioner, staff member, or audience member for separate consideration. The findings of the Planning Commission are recommendations to the Pennington County Board of Commissioners, who will make the final decision on some of the items. Item 3, construction permit review 1703 for Mitch Morris to review the grading of the site and use of a storage area to stockpile soil. It's been recommended for approval with the extension of construction permit 1703 with 7 conditions. Item 4, construction permit review 1704 for the City of Rapid City to review site work for the East Rapid City water system expansion for the Morris Lane PRV facility. It's recommended to end construction permit 1704. Item 5, construction permit review 0806 for Pete Lean and Sons to review the mining of 501 acres of limestone and disposal of clean concrete construction debris for reclamation in the general agriculture and limited agriculture district. Staff recommends to continue the review of construction permit 0806 to the April 9th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Item 6, construction permit review 0807 for Pete Lean and Sons to review the mining of 40 acres of limestone and disposal of clean concrete construction debris for reclamation in the general agriculture district. Staff recommends to continue the review of construction permit 0807 to the April 9th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Item 7, construction permit 1803 for site work specialist to construct a new water main, install water service lines, fittings, valves, valve boxes, fire hydrants, and other apparatuses, which include surface restoration and other incidental work. Staff recommends approval of construction permit 0803 with 10 conditions, probably 1803, not 0803. Item 8, conditional use permit review 1520 for Mitch Morris to review the construction equipment sales on subject property in general commercial district. Staff recommends approval of the extension of conditional use permit 1520 with 15 conditions.
Any items that staff would like to pull?
No, sir.
Do I understand that we need to make at least an edit on number 7 as 1803?
Believe so.
Okay, so CP 1803 for item number 7. Any items that the board would like to pull off? Sure, go ahead.
PJ, I'm just wondering on items 5 and 6, what's the reason? What are some of the issues that are kind of brewing on the construction permits that are being reviewed?
Sure. Brittany?
Good morning, Brittany Molitor, Environmental Planning Supervisor. It has to do with disturbance within the section line right-of-ways. So I'm working with the State's Attorney's Office to see if they need to vacate those or get approval from the board to do that.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Brittany.
Anyone else on the board like to pull any of the items off the consent agenda? Nope. Any public, any of these items that were just read, items 3 through 8, if you would like any of those items to be considered outside of one vote from the consent agenda, please come forward and let us know. All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve our consent agenda, items 3 through 8.
So moved.
Motion
Second?
and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That takes us to item number 9.
Thank you. You talk while I get this to work.
Frank Waiseth, Planner 2. Item 9 is layout plat 1803 Applicants are Carrie and Sabrina Johnson. The request is to combine 3 lots in order to create 1 lot of the new Johnston subdivision. It goes along with item 10, vacation of easement 1705, same applicant. And they are requesting to vacate a portion of the easement, this private road here, to be absorbed into that proposed Lot 1. Staff recommends approval of item 9 with, with 11 conditions.
All right, any questions for staff? All right, any public like to speak on behalf of item 9? Any discussion from our side of things? If not, the recommendation is to approve layout plat PL 1803 with the following 11 conditions. Is there a motion? Bill, motion.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, thank you. Item 10.
Item 10, vacation of easement 1801 to vacate the end of this private roadway as noted on this plat. Staff recommends approval with 3 conditions.
All right, any further questions? Seeing none, since it's the same one. Any public comment, just in case? All right, my recommendation, oops, I just passed it. Recommendation is to approve of vacation of easement VE 1801 with the following 3 conditions. Is there a motion for the same?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Takes us to 11.
Yes. Item 11 is layout plat 1804. Douglas Norberg is the applicant, Buckhorn Surveying is the agent. The request is to reconfigure lot lines to create 2 new lots, each approximately 3 acres. I was routed through interdepartmental review. Only concern primarily was raised by Highway regarding the placement of the newly formed private access easement here. Just requesting that it be lined up more so with the existing easement that serves access to this property to avoid driving over private land. No other major concerns raised during the review, and staff is recommending approval with 13 conditions.
Any questions for staff? Any members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item? Seeing none, recommendation is to approve layout plat PL 1804 with the following 13 conditions.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Takes us to item number 12.
Cassie Bolstead, Assistant Planning Director. Item 12 is a rezone and comprehensive plan amendment. This is a request to rezone 7.05 acres from General Agriculture District to Low Density Residential District, and to amend the comprehensive plan to change the future land use to Low Density Residential District as well. The applicant and agent is Boom Construction, or Dane Boomsma. He is in the audience today if you do have any questions for him. This is a request that basically corrects an issue that was identified after this lot was platted through the city of Box Elder here just recently. It's in Box Elder's 3-mile platting jurisdiction. So they replatted this. Staff did not get routed on that routing from Box Elder. There was an incorrect email address, so we were not aware until after this had already been platted that this had been done. So the applicant is just trying to bring this property into compliance with its zoning now. Currently contains a residence that is being built and some farm outbuildings. There is Within half a mile of the subject property, the zonings are limited agriculture district, general agriculture district, and the city limits of Box Elder. Future land use zoning within a half a mile is general agriculture district and city limits of Box Elder. When this was routed through the interdepartmental review process, nothing of significance came back. They do have a building permit on file for the new house that they're constructing. And excuse me, since the applicant is requesting this in order to correct an illegal lot size, staff is recommending approval of rezone 1801 and comprehensive plan amendment 1801.
Any
Move for
questions?
approval.
All right, move for approval. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Oh.
That's Dane.
That's the property owner?
Yes.
All right, come on up, sir. You know we just approved it.
I do. Dane Boomsma, Boom Construction. I'm not up here to oppose your approval of the rezone. I just want to bring something to attention to the commissioners, and I'm going to work with the planning director, hopefully to rectify this. Have not seen a whole lot of success so far, but so this lot was replatted prior to me owning it. I understand that you guys didn't get routed. It didn't get rezoned. I bought it after it was replatted. I went through the application process after the platting, not knowing that it did not conform to the zoning, per Pennington County. I was issued a building permit, built a house. We're getting to the end, and the underwriter of the gal that's buying it actually is the one that discovered that it doesn't meet this zoning. So the end result, I'll keep this short, is that it's going to cost this homeowner, who's a single mother of 5 kids, $2,000 to $3,000 because of our environment in the mortgage industry, because of her rate lock. This permit was pulled in October. So the reason I wanted to speak to this is because we go through all these application processes and internal reviews, and I'm hearing the agendas, and there's 11 conditions and 7 conditions and all these conditions for these building permits. Why was this not caught when I pulled my building permit, was my question to the staff. And basically said, well, we have non-conforming all over the county. We don't have non-conforming pulling building permits. So in my opinion, and I'm just expressing a little frustration as a contractor, that if we're going through this process, which Pennington County's process is longer than any other governmental agency in the surrounding area. Rapid City, Meade County, Box Elder are the 3 major ones that I work with. Pennington County is the longest permitting process out of the 4. Why was this not caught during the permitting process? What is our reviews? Why would the county not make sure when somebody's pulling a building permit that you're fit the zoning that you're issuing a building permit for? That to me just does not make sense. So, like I said, I tried setting up a meeting. I had a death in the family, and I have not met with TJ directly. The last time I talked to TJ, it was not our fault. We didn't catch it. There's non-conforming all over the county. That's a concern to me as a contractor and as a citizen. So I just wanted to express that. I'm hoping to work with staff to hopefully the next guy doesn't happen, because the end result, like I said, it's going to cost this gal a couple $3,000 to keep her interest rate because they've only gone up. We can't close. The house has been done. This is a 6-week minimum process. So it just creates a lot of havoc when these things aren't caught. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item. 13.
Frank Weiss, Planner 2. This is for item 13, conditional use permit review 1627. This was continued from the February 26th meeting. This is a review for a vacation home rental in a low-density residential district. Staff is requesting guidance on this, as we have worked with the agent for this and not been able to meet the conditions of approval, primarily having a local contact for this rental. We have outlined 3 options moving forward for this request. First would be to end conditional use permit 1627 as conditions of approval have not been met. Second option could be to continue this to the May 14th meeting, provided that the applicant provide a local contact with updated information to all of the surrounding property owners and pay the associated fees for the review. And finally, is potential for extending the conditional use permit with 15 conditions, primarily ones that have existed for this conditional use permit when it was approved last year and reviewed then.
All right. Oh,
Mr. Chair, I
Yes.
do believe we have Colin Goodwin on the phone, I believe.
okay. First and foremost, is there any questions for staff? Nope. All right.
I have a
Oh,
question.
go ahead, Lori.
Yes.
For this particular property, do we have any complaints? I didn't see anything noted in the report related to the vacation home use of this report, of this property?
No, to staff's knowledge, there not have been any complaints regarding the use of this property.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Any other questions for staff? See,
Just,
go ahead, Kathy.
just so that I'm clear on this, is this essentially the same issue for 13, 14,
It is.
Yep.
15, and even
There's 4 of them.
16? They're all, it's really
Yeah.
all the same issue?
Yeah, managed by the same company, yes.
Right, okay.
So yeah, in the update for this section in the staff report, we have outlined the contact we've had with the two representatives from Vaco Vacation Rentals, Carson and Colin Goodwin, and have had conflicting information with them, and they have not carried through on their promises to provide a local contact by the previous deadline, which was March 15th.
Okay. Any further questions for staff? All right. Seeing none. You said it's Colin? Colin's on the line. All right. Well, then I'm willing to patch him through, or if he's ready to go. Colin, can you hear us?
I am here. Yes, sir.
All right. You'd like to speak to this item?
Yeah, I definitely would. I heard that last part there, and I would say more than anything, the statement that said, we did not come through on our promise to provide it by March 15th. I guess that would be a controversial comment in the sense that that contact happened with Carson after I had already discussed May 1st with Cassie, who's the assistant director. Now, I realize word is important when you talk to Carson, but I guess what happened, it was a miscommunication. There's part of the staff talking to Carson, part of the staff talking to me, and what I had relayed to Cassie is that I actually have an update, and I have worked towards securing a local contact, which is further along than it ever has been. So a little backstory, just real quick. This is our 4th season operating Vaco Vacation Rentals, and I would say we've done an excellent job for our clients. I heard that I heard you say there's been no complaints. We've worked really hard to comply with the rules. We've gotten our Pennington County conditional use permits on all the homes that we manage. We work with the state hand in hand. A lot of the homes that you see on this list, there's 4 of them. Many of them have actually made alterations to the home, like physical renovations to meet the state requirements, the Department of Health. So I would say just up front that we are experienced. This is not something that is, new to us. So we're experienced. Our homeowners, we've done a good job for them. We've been able to do this without complaint. And this is really the first time that any issue has come up with Pennington County other than, the conditional use permit process, which is rather lengthy, which you know very well. We've gone through all of that. So where I stand today is in, I'm requesting that we be able to move forward. I want to work with Cassie and the team, and I am going to be doing that personally, just to clarify. Based on this incident alone, I jumped in and I said, look, there needs to be no more contact with anybody but me. I'm going to make the calls. I'm going to make sure that everything goes through properly. And so I've removed Carson from that, and I have made a significant step forward in providing a local contact. And really, that's the underlying issue, if I'm understanding correctly, that what we need to resolve to going into this next vacation rental season.
Okay, Colin, I have a question for you. Can you tell me how Carson got involved as being the point of contact?
Absolutely. Carson managed Vaco Vacation Rentals, 1425 Mount Rushmore Road, worked there. you know, he was the local point of contact. Sincerely, I mean, and one thing to note about our business is it is seasonal. And, you know, life decision, Carson made the choice. He couldn't, you know, survive the winter without an income. So he was no longer the local point of contact. And he was open to the county about that. I mean, he contacted them and said, hey, look, I'm not there anymore. I'm moving to get a job. And he relocated because of work. But he became the local contact as a local contact working in the area.
Okay, so who do you have currently as the local contact?
We don't have anyone listed as a local contact, and that's what one thing that I've been speaking with Cassie. We've talked at least 4 times in the past 30 days, and what I relayed to Cassie is, you know, I've read the ordinance that says, hey, if the main person isn't there, just provide a local contact. What I feel strongly about in the vacation rental business and to my clients and really to the county is I don't want to just appoint someone. I could, you know, based on the ordinance, I could appoint anybody. But what I am seeking is a licensed property manager, you know, because there's another requirement there that I am confident can, you know, carry this job through. I don't want to hire someone and have to go through this again. So I've been working on that for about, I would say, 30 to 45 days, and I have made significant progress, and I will have a definitive hopefully within the next week.
Are there any further questions?
Mr. Chair,
Go ahead, Lori.
can I ask Mr. Goodwin? You're the owner of Vaco Vacation Rentals. Do you have vacation properties in other states? Can you hear me? Mr. Goodwin?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you manage vacation home rentals in other states besides South Dakota?
No, ma'am, we do not.
Can you tell me how many properties you manage in the state of South Dakota?
11.
Are they just in the Black Hills?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? All right, seeing none. Any members of the audience like to speak on behalf of this item? Come on up, sir.
Morning.
Good morning.
I'm Gerard Milner. I'm number 15.
Oh.
And this kind of caught us off guard. My wife and I received a letter in the packet in Friday's mail. So we haven't had much of a chance to kind of get our head around what you guys were needing and what is lacking, other than a conversation I had with Bailey Goodwin, and I hadn't had a chance to talk to Colin or Carson. But we own the property at 13704 Highway 40 in Keystone, and we're doing what we think we're supposed to be doing every step of the way to make the thing work. So receiving this on Friday was kind of alarming and disappointing, to say the least. So up until just a couple of weeks ago, I talked to Carson, and my understanding was everything was good and we were ready for the season. The calendar was starting to fill, and didn't have any idea anything was going on, to be honest. So I just want you guys to know that as an owner, I'm going to work to get to the bottom of it as well. And whether that's with Vaco and Colin or someone else, this is kind of embarrassing and frustrating, but I guess, again, getting this Friday, not really having a lot of time to figure it out over the weekend, kind of throwing myself on the mercy of the court, because obviously you guys have concerns and they're legitimate, and we just wanted to let you know, as property owners, we have a nice property. It went well last year. I don't think the neighbors complaining because we're quite a ways from everybody and so on, but that's all I had, really.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions? Any further questions? Any other?
If you don't mind, I'll add to that. You know, that's one of my biggest frustrations too, and I don't want to jump in that. You know, Jerry, we've worked with Gerald Milner, like you said last year, and you know, we've got a good relationship with them. But these letters, I was not notified till 5:10 on Friday afternoon that this would be meeting this morning. So I apologize to Gerald. I was not aware either. The clients actually got the letter even prior to me knowing about this. You know, as a property manager, I want to be proactive and take care of any issues before it gets to my clients. But I will say I was not notified either until 5 o'clock, and I was given 20 minutes to return the call, which I did, and I didn't get back in time. So we had some correspondence over email, but just wanted to say that as well, is I was not given notice either till Friday.
Okay. Any other audience members like to speak on this item? If not, any further questions?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we use the third option and approve the extension of conditional use permits to use 1627 with 15 conditions. Since the conditions allow, you know, the people to be in compliance with the conditional use permit, we heard in the comprehensive plan update that one of the major industries in our area is tourism, and I think we should do everything we can to support that industry. This is a fledgling company that has 11 properties in this area, and I think we should support them.
There's a motion
I'll
for
second that.
item C, seconded. Any further discussion? PJ, you look like you have a,
Yeah, just approval of the motion from the planning commission. You're going against the zoning ordinance. Board of Commissioners can do that.
how so? Can you explain
The
that?
condition for the vacation home rentals is a local contact needs to be a permanent resident within 50 driving miles. They don't have one.
But they're in the process of appointing one, and the condition in the permit requires them to have it done by a certain date.
We try not to work off of intent.
But we do that, we work with people all the time on their intent to get things done, you know, by a certain deadline.
Yes, Commissioner, we have, and this body has also asked the staff to stop being as lenient. So that's what we are doing.
But again, you know, in order to promote tourism and in order to prevent these people from not taking reservations and not being able to run a business, I think we should encourage them to, you know, comply with it according to the conditions, because if they don't, the conditional use permit ends, right?
No. Based on your motion?
Well, they have to meet the conditions of it, or you can bring an enforcement action against them because they haven't met the conditions of the permit.
Correct. And that one condition is specifically for the people who live in the surrounding areas. If they have a complaint, if you remember during the VHR hearings, the biggest concern is that the public doesn't know where to go when there is an issue. And that's why that one of any of those conditions is very important. That was public driven and committee driven.
But they have to appoint a local contact.
They do,
Yeah,
yes.
And currently he
and-
doesn't have one.
and he's working on it.
Okay, I just wanted to
I'm
let you,
just, you know, I mean, okay.
just letting you know the impacts.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, go ahead, Kathy.
Can I have a?
Hold on just a second.
Can I have a follow-up with PJ, please?
Yes, PJ.
PJ?
Kathy would like to ask you a follow-up question.
I just want to understand, so what you just explained to us, if I understand it, is that option C, which you lay out for one of the ones that we could consider, is a violation of the ordinance?
This body does not have the right to go against the ordinance. The Board of Adjustment does.
So then why is this
Propose it
C
then.
out there for
Yeah.
us to
Yeah,
choose from?
that's actually a very good question. Now that I'm thinking about it, probably shouldn't have been in there. The second option to continue it, to allow them to bring it in, to get it up to date, is probably the ideal.
I would make a substitute motion to continue until such time that he does have a legitimate local contact.
So item B, or
Option B.
option B, that was outlined, continue review of conditional permit CU 16-27 to the May 14th, 2018 planning meeting.
Is May 14th our next meeting?
I don't have
No.
the calendar in front of me now.
Yeah, there's
Maybe
a,
April.
9th.
So it had to be the
Oh, yeah,
April
so
9th.
why May 14th? I mean, isn't that extending it
Cassie
out a bit?
Bolstead. May 14th was the date that we put in there because May 1st is when we've been told is will have everything that they're in the process of doing done. May 14th is the first meeting for you
After
guys
that.
after that May 1st.
Mr.
That's
Chair.
why we said May 14th.
Go ahead, Mark.
Cassie, the only thing that we need to really worry about legally, correct me if I'm wrong, PJ, is that they have that local contact, right? The rest of the conditions can be met with, we can approve this as long as he's got that local contact without any issues, right?
The local
I need to work
contact
on the rest.
the local contact is the biggest thing. There are a couple of other minor things that we can work with in terms of a couple of the other ones that are listed for an inaccurate maximum occupancy on their website and things along those lines. But the local contact is definitely the biggest thing.
Okay, so we wouldn't have to wait till May 1st. If he gets that local contact in a week, which is, seems to think he could, we could bring this back at the second April meeting, right?
You could change item B to say to that it be continued to no later than the May 14th. That way, if he does get it sooner, it can come back to you guys
Okay,
sooner.
then I would amend my motion to say no later than May 1st.
Yes, and we would still like to have those three conditions that are outlined in item B included with that continuation. That helps us out a little bit.
That's acceptable to me in my motion.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, continue the review of conditional use permit CU 1627 to no later than May 1st, any one of the planning commission meetings.
Correct.
Okay, so everyone understand?
May 14th would be your guys' commission meeting. May 1st is when they're saying they could have everything done. May 14th would be your guys' meeting.
Okay, I got you.
Got that, Jerry? No later than May 14th.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? I'm going to stop for just 1 second. I know there was a gentleman who raised his hand. Is that, I mean, do you need to address anything specific with that? Because typically we don't do that during our discussion on that side of it. I just want to make sure we're kind of meeting intent of what you're thinking is going on. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, Jared.
Yes.
Can you come forward then real quick? That way we can hear you on the mic.
I'm local, so point of contact, does it not allow for the owner to be point of contact if they're within 50 miles?
Sure it does.
So if that's a big issue, I guess I'm going to ask my property manager why I'm not on the list.
Okay.
Because that would resolve that, I'm assuming. Correct. All right. And then some of the items, the 500 feet, first-class mail, all these sort of things, that was all done a year ago, so that's going to be done again to the neighbor? Is there, I guess, what's the logic behind that?
Per our zoning ordinance, when the local contact is updated, they do have to re-notify everybody within 500 feet via first-class mail. The first time with the original request, it's certified mail. This time, it's only first-class mail. But it's basically just updating them that there is new local contact information and what that new information is, so that they have it for their records as neighboring property owners.
Right. Jared, right?
Jerry,
Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, you did state yours was item number 15, is that correct?
Correct.
So when we get to that one, if there's some specific tweaks that you would like for us to consider, we'll discuss those. How about that?
okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, so our motion is to continue. Say again?
Good observance.
Yes. I just wanted to make sure I was keeping up with all the things that were going on in there. All right, with that in mind, we have the motion and there was a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Takes us to item 14. This, correct me if I'm wrong, similar situation, correct?
Yes, yep. This one is just another vacation home rental. This one's on Silver Fox Spur. I would like to point out this is one of the ones that is advertised for an incorrect maximum occupancy, so that will need to be corrected.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Colin, you still on the phone?
Yes, sir.
This would, the the previous motion would apply to this as well. If we go forward with this to continue it, you don't have a local contact for this particular piece of property either, correct?
Correct. And it'll be the same local contact for all the properties. And I'll carry a conversation with Jerry offline about that for his particular property. But once I appoint a local contact, it'll carry through all these 13, 14, 15, and 16.
Okay, I understand. Very well.
Any further questions?
Cassie, and so you also agree that we should not have been we should not have been presented option C?
Looking at it further, it does go against our zoning ordinance, not something that we had, not something that had come to our mind when we wrote our staff reports, but.
Okay. Any further questions? Any public like to speak on this item? Seeing none, I'm going to assume that we're looking at option B as similar wording as the previous one, except for it's going to say CU 1710.
That would be my motion.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair, can I just clarify that that will also have the no later than the May 14th meeting, and this one has 4 conditions and not 3. I just want to,
4 conditions and not 3.
the last one had 3 conditions, this one has that 4th one.
Tracking. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That takes us to item 15.
Item 15 is Mr. Milnar's vacation home rental, same situation. And I would just like to point out that this one is back down to the 3 conditions if you guys continue it. This one is advertised appropriately, so it doesn't have that 4th condition that advertisements or anything need to be corrected, so.
And I'm going to assume that item C is also still in violation of our ordinance.
Correct.
Okay. So with that said, is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak on behalf of this item?
Mr. Chair, we'll accept that. Does Mr. Milner want to be designated the local contact for this property? And then you could take care of it now? That's all I'm asking, I guess.
I think I would like to be, but can there be 2? If it's disclosed in the letters to the neighbors and so on? Because obviously Colin's going to visit with me later. But I would hope that since I'm local and can reply and respond to needs, that I would be on that list besides the person he's going to try to locate.
Cassie, is that allowed for them to say that our local contact is the homeowner, da-da-da, or, someone to be designated by VACO, and then there'd have to be a second mailing where VACO specifically points one out, or can they just have a generic phone number?
There has to be a specific
Name.
Yes, a specific person generally. There can be 2. Mr. Milner can be one too if he wants to, if him and Colin work that out and that's the way they want to list it. There could be whoever Colin is working with and Mr. Milner in this situation. I would point out that option B, as you guys are doing it, does give them the time to work that out.
Okay.
Okay.
I appreciate that because we have to go back into our room and have a discussion, so
Absolutely.
thank you for offering that.
Thank you, Jerry. All right. Is there any further discussion? Any audience members like to come speak on behalf of this item? If not, is there any further discussion from the board up here? If
Mr.
not,
Chair,
yes, Mark.
Mr. Milner, is that continuance going to cause a problem with any rental issues right now? I mean,
I'm not sure. We're not going to have any bookings before Memorial Day weekend,
okay,
so we hope not. We don't think so.
good enough. All
Thank
right.
you.
No. All right, thank you. So, options A or option B for us to consider as a motion. We're aware that option B is going to be worded similar to the last 2 as far as not before the May 14th meeting. This one has 3 conditions. Is there a motion?
I'll move to continue the review of conditional use permit 1711 to no later than the May 14th, 2018 Planning Commission with 3 conditions.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 16.
This one's a little different, as I have tried to contact the property owner via certified mail, and there's some other conditions that she hasn't met. I did speak to her and Carson back in January, and still nothing has been done, so that's why I had recommended to end this one, because it's been 2 months and there are several conditions that have not been met continuously for the past 2 months, and I notified her by certified mail because the VACO phone number was disconnected, so I couldn't get a hold of them. And their mailing address, that's where we were sending them, is what the mailing address was on the application. So I just contacted the homeowner directly and still received no response.
All right. Any questions for staff? Colin, are you still there on the line?
I'm here.
Would you like to speak to item 16?
You might have to tell him the name. He might not have them in front of him.
I can. I don't have this. I have the agenda that the Milner sent me, but I was not provided the details on these, and so I guess I'm going into this a little blind. I know this is the Pimentel's property. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So I guess would Cassie mind giving a brief backstory on the issue with the homeowner?
Or Brittany?
Brittany.
There's some questions on the septic system. They haven't received their operating permit for their septic system. Carson never signed a statement of understanding back when it was approved in 2017. The local contacts are not correct. It's advertised as having 10 overnight guests. The first condition only allows 6. The review fee was never paid from the last time. And all of this has been sent to the homeowner and to the address that we have on file for VACO, because we haven't been given any other address.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I can speak specifically to the Pimentels. You know, that a lot of, as property managers, we can do so much for our clients, but they still have to be in compliance. This was something that we put back on the homeowner that said, hey, these issues need to be resolved. We've done our part, and I don't think anything's been done. So what I would request, if this one doesn't meet compliance because of those issues you just mentioned, it's going to be at the choice of the homeowner. Whether they choose. I don't know if there's bigger issues or not with that septic. So that's something that they have to make that decision on. So I guess I am willing to treat this one like the others, but with the caveat that I'll have specifics, and if they don't meet that, then we won't continue that one. But I would like the opportunity to have the owners of the home speak their piece on that.
Colin, just so you're aware, the current recommendation is to actually end it, not even can continue it.
Right. I'm asking that we can continue it, and I understand why you say that, but I there's a good chance it will end just based on we have given that to the clients, and they have made the deliberate decision not to go forward with that. But what I'm requesting is if I can just make that official, because it's from a business end. I want to make it work. But if they choose not to, then we can't do anything with that.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
So Colin, what you're asking is you want a little more of an opportunity to talk to the Pimentels about getting this straightened out, and by the time we talk again, you'll know one way or another whether they're going to straighten it out or not. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That's correct. And it may very well turn out that we won't continue it because, like I said, we have put this on their plate. And when it comes to items like this, they have we can't rearrange their septic for them. So there's a good chance that this one will end. But I would like to continue to just get a formal, official answer from them because I haven't heard that from them yet.
And how long would that take you, Colin?
Oh, I could have it done this week.
So then I would recommend that the 9th of April meeting if we're
Move
gonna
to continue item 16 to the 9th of April.
There's a motion to continue this item until the 9th of April. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jerry, that's the next planning commission meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Just want to make sure I'm reading the calendar right.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Lori?
But I'd like to point out, according to what Brittany's saying, this home has never been in compliance since the initial permit in 2017?
It has not, and during the last planning commission meeting, there were four conditions, that were put on this that were similar, that they still didn't meet. I sent them a certified mailing listing those conditions that they still didn't meet, and I didn't hear anything from them. So that's why we're where we are today. And also the continuation fee hasn't been paid, and that's part of our ordinance. This has been continued, not because of our lacking in getting things done, it's because we have not had any contact from VACO or the homeowner on these issues.
Mr. Chair, and just
Yes,
so
go
I
ahead.
understand, is it possible that the homeowner is thinking VACO is handling this? Or, I just want to give them a break if we can.
I don't know. I had talked to Carson way back when I was working with Gullickson's back in January on all of these issues, and we're still here.
But we've never actually talked to this homeowner, correct? Or
She
you-
called me once back in January and
Of
said
this
that
year?
she was going to, yes, but said that she was going to get it taken care of, and we've had this in front of the planning commission a month ago, and then I sent her the letter again and still haven't heard from either party.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mark?
Colin, didn't you mention that Carson has moved to seek employment elsewhere?
That's correct, yes, sir.
So that could be the reason why we're not being able to get a hold of the guy. I don't see any problem with that, giving him a chance to get a hold of him.
And I've reestablished myself as the contact recently because I want to make sure that all that this is taken care of appropriately. But in this specific scenario, just to be frank, I don't see it continuing. We have, kind of like Brittany's saying, we have put it on the homeowner. They've put it on them, then they put it on us, and we've put it on them. And I don't think that they're going to be willing or able to meet those requirements. But I just wanted, before I lose a property, I just wanted to make sure that they're not willing to do that. But that's probably the case, to be honest.
I'm willing to give it one more continuance with a hard stop at the end of that one if we don't have the stuff reconciled and figured out. That's what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to support that aspect of it. So correct me if I'm wrong, there's a motion, correct? Motion and second. And is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. That takes us to item 17.
Item 17 is Plan Unit Development Review 1603, to review a plan unit development to allow a specialty resort development to include such uses as vacation home rentals, weddings, receptions, picnics, family reunions, parties, single-family residences, bed and breakfast, storage, gift shops, spas, cabanas, bistros, and detached accessory structures with living quarters, duplexes, et cetera. This has been before the Planning Commission and the board several times. The issues that are necessitating the continuation are some of the disagreements between what the conditions would be, primarily with sound, the noise, quiet hours, and on which lots. I believe there was some concern that the quiet hours were for the entire PUD. Staff has changed it just for the lots that are immediately adjacent and include the B&B and the tent and the parking areas across the street. With that, the tent was the main issue. It was allowed to have a temporary building permit approved by the Board of Commissioners almost a year ago, I think it was. I can't remember the exact date. The intent of that was to see how it did with the weather and to see if it was structurally sound, if I understand it correctly. I think that was February, actually, when it was approved. It wasn't until August that the applicants put the tent up. So from there, staff had requested a little bit more time and they had also asked for an earlier review than the February date that was approved by the board. So staff had asked for a little bit more time. So even with the request for the early review, nothing came out of that other than allowing the tent to be up longer. And we went to February for the review. It went to the board. There was a request from the applicant's lawyer that it be continued, the review be continued back down to the Planning Commission because the Planning Commission was going to rehear this PUD today. And primarily, if I remember correctly, was to review what the board had decided on the tent. So we are here today. The board has not made a decision on the tent. I understand that a lot of planning commissioners and even board of commissioners have been out to the tent. I've been out there a couple times. Our fire administrator has been out there, and we just got this sent to us last night around 11:30, printed it off and gave it to you with his recommendations as far as the tent. Now, he talks a lot about the integration of the tent structure into the permanent structure, which is on the concrete. And reminder, the county does not have building codes. So whether or not this even meets any codes, we're not sure, but the county does not have building codes, so that type of integration in the county is, as of now, allowed. So his recommendations are on those pages. Staff is not making a recommendation, but instead seeking guidance from the Planning Commission because of a few concerns. Staff is aware that there is some civil issues going on between the neighbors and the applicants. And we're not sure where that is as far as the court decisions, if there even has been a decision or how many hearings. Since February 20th of 2018, staff has been out to the property to speak with the applicants to review the improvements made to the kitchens and the bathrooms located within the tent. So the first time I was out there, the bathroom was finished, but the kitchen was not. It just still had exposed 2x4s. When Jerome and I had gone out there to meet the applicants, they had completely enclosed what they're calling the kitchen. There wasn't anything in there for a kitchen. It was all stored out in the lobby of the tent. But they have put a permanent, appears to be a roof over the kitchen and the bathroom now, and then the tent is over top of that. And then also it is finished with drywall, and also they're doing more work on the inside. They're going to be bringing back in the things that are in the kitchen, as far as I know, are like a cooler, some kind of like an industrial kitchen. You expect to see the tables, an industrial dishwasher, things of that nature. Staff is looking for guidance from the Planning Commission, and this would have to go before the board as well for approval. Staff has made some adjustments to some of the conditions, specifically condition 13, the intensity and duration of the sound for any of the sources from lot 3, 4, 10, 11, 12, 44, and 45 are in compliance with the South Dakota Codified Law 121835. That was the one that the applicant had agreed to, because originally it was going to be the county ordinance, noise ordinance, which we didn't have one, but we were told that we did. So in talking with the applicants, they had agreed that this would be acceptable, so that made it into the ordinance. The applicant has submitted just a couple of minutes ago some changes that they're going to talk about, and I believe it looks like at least condition 13 is listed as one of them. Condition 14, as far as the quiet hours, originally it said the quiet hours would be from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. for the PUD, and there was concern that if somebody does buy a lot and puts a single-family residence up there, that they didn't want to be subject to those quiet hours, so staff just changed those. Also, one of the concerns was about staff's recommendation for the back-end parking up closest to the tent, so that when they pull back out onto the gravel road, that they would be facing the road instead of backing out. So staff is leaving that up to the road district for signage on the road, as the evangelistas, I believe, head the road district, and to make it safe for the public use on the road. Our concern is going to be the parking areas and that they're sized correctly, labeled correctly. So staff did, in speaking with the applicants, made a consideration on that and leaving it up to the road district for the safe signage. Other than that, staff would look for guidance and direction from the Planning Commission on 1603. And if the planning commission chooses to approve the continuation of PU 1603, staff would recommend the inclusion of the 43 conditions and possibly more, depending on what you're looking to do for the tent.
All right, any questions for staff?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mark?
the permanent structure is wood and sheet
Drywall.
rock with a
Yep.
regular composite roof. And does it contain it sounds like it's inside the tent, covered by the tent?
Correct.
Okay.
One correction, though. I don't think it has a composite roof. You can correct me if I'm wrong. It doesn't.
It's got the drywall.
Oh, just drywall.
I don't know what's on top of that, though.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Okay. Well, the one thing that I'm concerned about is that if that's considered to be the kitchen, then there's no way that it can be, that it can meet the recommendations of the fire manager.
You're thinking the same line I'm thinking, Mark.
So knowing that that could possibly be the kitchen, would it still have to, would they be okay with it being less than 20 feet if it's in a permanent room? Because I'm assuming they're going to have a gas stove in there for the kitchen.
I think correct me if I'm wrong, these are just recommendations from Jerome that we would add to the current ones that are listed. Is that correct, PJ?
Correct. He basically is just looking at, if you're looking at a temporary membrane structure, which we don't have an ordinance for right now, which we will soon, this is what is industry standard to follow.
Okay. Okay. Does it kind of help? I mean, I got exactly what you're thinking, because as I read through a lot of those, I'm like, well, it's all underneath that tent. Even in the kitchen, it's all underneath that tent.
But it's also contained
Correct.
within the tent.
Right.
So I think that it shouldn't be a problem. I would
Correct.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Lori.
PJ, you made the comment that we will have an ordinance about tent and membrane structures. Your staff is in the process of writing one?
I am.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And you would anticipate that by what date?
Oh, I'm guessing probably first presented by June.
Okay, thank you.
We have about 20 zoning ordinances to present to you guys soon.
Okay.
All right. Any further questions, Kathy?
Yeah, so currently, right now, I was kind of curious about these temporary building permits, and so I looked in the ordinance and so on, and I didn't find any reference at all to temporary building permits. And I looked on the website, and there's just one application for a building permit. There's not one for temporary and one for permanent. So help me understand a little bit about how one even gets a temporary building permit.
So in section 511, the fee section, there's a $60 charge for temporary building permits in the ordinance. So when somebody
Where is this?
Section 511?
In
Yes.
this book?
Yes.
Okay.
So when somebody comes in for, primarily it's been tents or mobile mini mobiles, those type of structures, it's $60, and then we work with them to determine how long they need them. This staff has not permitted a tent over 180 days. The last ones that we had done for, I think, were about 90 days. However, with the conditional use permit for under canvas, the planning commission and the board approved an 11 months out of the year use of those individual canvas tents.
For the small, those are
For the
small
small
size.
ones, correct.
For
Yeah,
each
like
pad.
bedroom size, but a
Each
little
pad,
bit
right,
bigger.
has its own.
Yeah, there's 80 of them.
Okay.
Yep, correct.
Okay, so there's a fee that's assigned for temporary, but there's no rules associated with it other than the practices that you've established.
Right, so if it's not a tent, like it's a structure that's going to be temporary, we don't allow it to go over 2 years because the building permit is only good for 2 years, so you have to have the final construction by then. So that's been our cutoff. We've never had anything go even over a year as far as temporary.
Okay, so how about things like, greenhouses and so on that are soft materials? Are they temporary?
It depends on the size, and it depends on what foundation is. Like if it's concrete, if it's permanently connected to the ground, then it would require a building permit.
A permanent one or temporary?
Permanent. And temporary, depending on size. If it's under 12 by 12 and it's not permanently affixed to the ground, there's no building permit
But if
required
it's-
either way.
So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, greenhouses are soft. tents are soft.
Mhm.
So what's the distinction between, why do greenhouses, if they're connected to concrete and so on, get permanent and an event center tent wouldn't?
I can't tell you of any greenhouse that we permanently permitted,
I thought,
that I
that's what you just
personally
told me
did.
that.
Because of the,
No, you were asking in general what would happen.
Yeah.
I can't tell you that I've permitted any of them.
There was a property up in the hills that was going to do some concrete basing, and then they were gonna do the greenhouse hoops for their trees. Did we not permit that?
For the trees, that was.
You know what I'm talking, you remember what I'm talking
No,
about?
that was more
guy
permanent
was gonna
though.
grow trees
Yeah.
for
But I don't-
his, for his
That was a
property.
greenhouse, and it was the, it
And
was
it
a
was a
concrete,
hoop structure,
yes.
but he had a concrete foundation.
I think it was more permanent structure than a hoop
Nope.
structure, but
It was
I didn't
a
work on that
concrete,
one, so
well,
no.
it wasn't
Was-
even
it was the
concrete, it was
concrete-
concrete wall. It was the brick
Like the
walling.
bunker thing,
Yep,
yeah, for private use.
for
for private
use.
use.
Yeah.
But we, if I remember correctly, we were, I
That
mean,
was
I
a-
don't think he ever fully went through it, but it was recommended to us for a building permit for that.
Yeah, I don't remember them being that temporary though.
Well, it wasn't to
No,
be
it's not
temporary.
temporary.
I mean, it
to
was
be-
more of a more solid structure if I remember correctly. But
Was-
I didn't work on it, so I don't.
I remembered it was like concrete on one and
Three
three
sides or something
sides
like that.
and then, yeah, or something like that, but you know.
Well, I mean, near where I live, there's a greenhouse that's been there very, I don't know, I remember when it went up, but it's just there all the time. And it's a big structure, and it was operated commercially for a while, and now it's not. But, I mean, do you suppose that's got a temporary building permit for
I-
it? You don't know, of
I
course.
don't
but-
know. I mean, there's a tent that's also used, it's come up a lot, the one by the Hysiga exit.
Yes, right.
That has the solid size, that has a temporary building permit
Mm-hmm.
from 1985.
And they haven't renewed that one, is that correct?
No. And we're using what the decision is from the planning commission and the board based on this tent to see how we move forward, which is gonna guide the ordinance also.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
and
go
I
ahead, Laura.
forgot to disclose that I did go up and visit the site on March 15th.
I did as well on, I think I went on the same day, but later.
Yeah, and I visited too, I'm not sure the day, but it was last week.
Anybody else? visit?
Tuesday, I think, right?
Was it? Okay.
All right, any further questions?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mark?
I think part of the thought process on this, when we were talking with the Board of Commissioners a year ago, why it could be permanent, it had a lot to do with the type of material which the tent was made of. And it's made to last, this particular tent, according to the manufacturer. It's made to last 15 to 20 years, if I'm correct, which to us meant that's pretty permanent.
I agree.
And in Jerome's memo, one of the first thing he states is the material that this tent is made out of should be the minimum standard and guidelines for the county.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead,
And I
Lori.
guess I'd like to also state, we've had some fairly high winds this winter.
Oh, man.
And it withstood those, and as far as, from what I understood, is the snow load had no impact on, not that this has been, I don't know if this has been a heavy snow winter, but it's been really windy.
And the snow didn't even blow in. When I was out there, I noticed the walls even kept the snow out. I mean, even though they're fabric walls, they held the snow. It didn't push in on them that I was aware.
The applicant submitted some photos, and I just wanted to check with her, make sure it was okay to show. Of this, oh, jeez. So this is the permanent structure, the brown. The white is the membrane structure, and there's some snow load there. I don't know if the view from the B&B up the hill. And there's only 4 of them.
Any further questions for staff before we open it up to the public? All right. Anyone in the public like to speak on item number 17? Good morning, sir.
Alan Smoot, I'm here on behalf of the evangelistas who are also here if you have any questions for them. I went over this with them and they had a few requested revisions to the staff's recommendations, and it probably would save time if it's allowable for me to just hand you a printout of those revisions.
Sure, go ahead.
Is there enough for?
I think some of the comments were brought up too. I think I haven't seen the fire marshal's recommendations. They didn't get to me, but I think the recommendations, the evangelistos did review it, and they said it appears to be the safety recommendations for small tents, which usually may be canvas, they can be anything, not the same membrane that this
Just
is.
speak up a little bit, please.
Oh, sorry, I'll get a little closer. So the recommendations from what my clients have reviewed appear to be for small tents, and there's a big difference between the small tents and these big fire retardant or fireproof membranes that their tent is. As far as building permits, I know there's some confusion because we do not have a statute, or pardon me, an ordinance yet regarding tents, but they did have to acquire a permanent building permit, just a standard building permit, because they have a concrete foundation, concrete floor, as I know many of you know because you've been out there. And they also had to get a permit for the kitchen area that does have its separate roof, which is just another security thing, you know, with I think it's a drywall ceiling. So it's another protection before you could get to the fireproof membrane. So then going to the revisions that the applicants have requested concerning the staff's recommendations, I just moved right down to the end of the line, what's being recommended now, the 43 conditions. We just picked up on a few. I think one was two were condition 13 and 14 dealing with sound. We believe that the statute is appropriate. It's a state law that controls sound. It basically controls any unreasonable noise, and then you have the enforcement of law enforcement coming out to deal with those situations. We think that it might be inappropriate to treat evangelistos differently than other similarly situated folks. We would ask the board to consider recommending that the ordinance is enough. Either it doesn't need to be mentioned because it's already state law, pardon me, not the ordinance, the statute 22-18-35. Either it doesn't need to be mentioned because it is state law, or if it does need to be mentioned, then just a reference to all lots, because all lots should be subject to the state law. So we think the statute is sufficient. And if you want to stop me and ask questions in between, otherwise I'll just kind of roll through a few of these. So option one, we would prefer just to remove the conditions because the statute is sufficient. We provided two other options there that the evangelistos would be okay with. I think the option three, they would rather not have additional restrictions imposed on them that are not imposed on others similarly situated. But if they were to be imposed, then we've set out something that would be reasonable, we think. By the way, I think lot 44 was included in the lots dealing with the reception area, and that's actually a residential lot, so we removed that from that list. Condition 24, back into the road. This road, as I understand it, a road district makes this a public highway, as I understand, and we do have statutes to deal with the public highways. We think that condition should probably be removed, and according to my clients, they said the last time the Planning Commission here reviewed that, they recommended removal of this condition. Revision 27, again, the tent. I think from what I saw, I reviewed the video, and I think there were concerns where the Planning Commission wanted to have more information, as you guys have mentioned. I think it dealt with probably snow load, how it dealt with wind, and now we've had some 60, 70 mile an hour winds out there and sustained it very well. I do recall someone on the board here had mentioned does it have proper anchoring? I mean, these are important things. And it is double anchored to the concrete. So I think we've got a tent that is fireproof. Megan brought some samples of the tent membrane where you hold a flame to it for over a minute and it will not burn. So it is fireproof, certainly more fireproof than a stick-built home that obviously get permanent permits. And so we would ask that the recommendations of this board to the Board of Commissioners be that permanent permits should be granted. We understand that if there's a new ordinance that comes into play, that they will have to comply with that new ordinance. I did look in other areas, not that that affects this area, but it's just something to go on. And even in New York, they have International Fire Safety Code. They have permanent permits for tents, but they got to meet the code. They can't keep trash piled up in there. They got to move their trash out. They can't have flammable stuff up against the tent membrane. I mean, they go through a lot of things with the International Fire Safety Code that I think they will certainly comply with. As you've seen, it's a pretty nice structure, and I think it will be a nice place for wedding receptions and the such. Condition 43, I think I looked at the ordinance, and I'm not sure, I don't do a lot in front of these boards. If it's a policy maybe to have annual reviews of PUDs, but according to the ordinance, the only reason to review a PUD would be if there's a major amendment or if there's a change of use of the property that's not been approved under the conditions. And so maybe you can instruct me on how that works, but for this to come up as a periodic annual review for a PUD, it seems to be more like what I would see as a condo. You know, PUDs are kind of like, they're more of a permanent thing. Loan underwriters will give you a loan easier on a PUD than they will a condo because it's more permanent. And that was our understanding of what a PUD should be. And so we've made one, you'll see that I've marked out a place where I duplicated some language. I think I cut and pasted one time too many. But if you go back to page 4, we put in there the what would be we think would be a good reason to review a PUD is following the ordinance, any change in use, or as you guys know, there has been a lot of complaints from the neighbors. There's some inordinate hostility going on out there, and I personally, from my review of all this coming in late, it appears to be dealing over water rights, some confusion over water rights. That is in the court forum now, you know, and it's still in circuit court. So that is it's within their purview, and I don't think this board even has to deal with that issue. But that has triggered a lot of what's going on, and I think you'll probably hear some complaints today. We're asking that if a complaint has already been heard, determined to be unfounded and resolved, is it appropriate for planning to have or maybe they already have the authority to say, that's already been heard and resolved, that's not a reason to bring the evangelistos up here and burn your time to hear the same thing over again, because it seems to be kind of an open, I mean, it's meant to be an open forum, but if we keep repeating ourselves, it just takes a lot of time and can become harassment. So you'll see there on condition 43, we were saying if we could change that one to be, if there's a change in use, if there's a complaint that has not already been resolved, then there's a reason. You know, it gives the planning department the ability to review and say, well, we still see that there may be a condition that's not being met, so we will bring it forward to the board. And then, of course, as deemed necessary by Planning Commission or the Board of Commissioners to ascertain all conditions of approval are being met. I think the sound, I think I've already kind of covered that. And I believe that's all the issues. Anything else that you had? I'll ask the evangelist to come and address this.
Good morning, Dan Evangelisto. I think the only thing that Alan missed is in the staff's recommendations, item 27. For some reason, the verbiage of permanent tent got removed from that condition, which was approved last May. It just says tent now. And to me, that's a big thing that we were already approved for, was a permanent tent. And that just got pulled out.
Yeah, I would say, from my understanding, the Board of Commissioners did approve a condition that did say permanent tent. There was also another condition in there talking about a temporary building permit, I believe, and talking that needed to be determined whether it should become permanent. So it was a little confusing. What was approved for this PUD back then was a permanent tent, but then another condition talking about should the permitting be temporary or permanent. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right, any questions for Dan or Mr. Allen?
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, I'd like to get a sense of how much use the tent has. I mean, I guess I drive by it a few times in the summer, and sometimes there's no activity, and on occasion there is activity, and so on. So if you could maybe just explain to me how frequently this is used, how frequently it's lit up, how just explain the use pattern, if you would, please.
Hi, Nancy Evangelisto. It varies as to how much it gets used. Right now, we aren't taking any events till we know what the future is for this. So it has significantly reduced our revenue, and the money we've put into this, we're not being able to move forward on because of what happened at the last commissioners meeting. The use is generally on weekends. We do want all year round, so like during Christmas time and holiday times, we are allowed to have events. Valentine's Day, February is a big month that we will have events. Everybody likes to get married in February. So I would say weekends is the primary use.
So are you thinking that, there's 52 weeks a year, and it gets used like 2/3 of those weekends, would you say? So you're
Approximately.
So maybe 30 times a year?
Correct.
Is that about right? So
That's a fair
30
assessment.
times 35, maybe something, out of 365 days. So really, this is being used very few days compared to the entire year.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
I just had one more comment about this being a permanent tent. These are very expensive structures, the membranes. They're anchored. To make it temporary means we've got to take it down. If we take it down, we're going to damage that material because you have to fold it. Then you have to have another storage building built to house that massive tent. And many times you hire crews. I've worked with some of the folks that do the rally, and they rent the tent and pay thousands of dollars to have crews come in. Those tents will not last as long, and I would probably submit that they won't be as fireproof where they're folded over time. And then what do? We have a permanent structure that has a building permit, and the health and safety is checked on it twice a year. And inside that tent, we have chairs and tables and all the things that make it fun for people to come and have wedding receptions. And now we have to store all those things, and now we have to take a drop, maybe a plastic drop or something, and put over the whole kitchen area so it's not damaged to the elements. And that's flammable. So I am troubled by the logic of a reason to take that down and then put it back up.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
I can address that. I believe that the thought of the commission when we discussed it a year ago was that was going to be a permanent tent. You explained this, or Mr. Evangelisto explained this to us a year ago, and there'd be absolutely no reason to, in my opinion anyway, and I'm only one commissioner, but that we would want them to take it down and put it back up and take it down and put it back up. That doesn't make any sense to me at all.
Thank you. All right. Any further questions for the three that are up here?
The other issue that I just wanted to point out is the noise ordinance and the parking were at the previous meeting already removed. Okay, so
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that, because I wasn't hearing that.
Okay, fair
Okay,
enough.
thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other public like to speak on this item?
Good morning, members of the Planning Commission. I am Peggy Gibson and from Huron, and my husband Dale and I are the owners of Lot P, which is right across the road, Taylor Ranch Road, from the bed and breakfast, and it's 18.21 acres that runs all along Taylor Ranch Road and goes actually across Taylor Ranch Road up against the border of lots 1 through 5 for just so you understand where Lot P is located.
PJ, you're gonna pull that up so we can see it, so we understand.
Yep. And I have the stuff videos. I have the videos and stuff.
Okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
I gotta go get it.
And I have submitted several different memos in regard to, I'm speaking on behalf of the neighbors as well. Barbara Madison, who has the cabin right next to the Evangelistos on to the west. Peggy Bowser and Dan Behrens, who have the cabin on Lot 1. Robbie and Danelle Clausen, who have the house on Lot 8. And Donna Messer and Bill Newcomb, Bill Newcomb, who have the house on Lot 5, which is right to the east of 3 and 4, where the bed and breakfast are located. So we have, as neighbors, first of all, there are some building and use restrictions on all of the lots on Custer Trail Subdivision 1, which were filed with Pennington County in 2002 and are basically still in effect until at least 2020. And with those covenants, there basically is no commercial activity permitted, some very viable restrictions here on what can be on those lots. And I didn't know if you were aware that there were restrictions, building restrictions and covenants filed with the county regarding what uses can be had on those lots. The first memo here I submitted to planning and zoning was regarding some of the sections in the general zoning. 213, the intent of the PUD is to allow districts in which ingenuity, imagination, and design efforts of the part of the builders, architects, site planners, and developers can produce desirable residential developments. Well, I disagree that a tent fits that definition in section 213. I don't think it adds anything to the environment and to the residential district in which it's located. The other tent that I'm aware of in Hill City is a temporary tent that goes up and down and is not there permanently. I don't like looking at it. The neighbors don't like looking at it. The Evangelistos have perpetrated much mistrust in the neighborhood and have had some disagreements with almost all of the neighbors that are there. Under B, permitted uses of 213, property and buildings in the PUD are to be planned and organized as a single entity and as one complex land use unit rather than as a group of individual buildings located on separate lots. The circus tent is located on 2 lots. The bed and breakfast is located on 2 lots. So that is a violation of section 213. Under C, area regulation 4, the commission must be satisfied that the site plan for the PUD has met each of the following criteria or can demonstrate that one or more of them are not applicable and that a practical solution consistent with public interest has been achieved for each of these elements. That there is appropriate relationship to the surrounding area. How is a tent appropriate to the surrounding area? That privacy in terms of needs of individual families and neighbors is provided. All of the neighbors have complained to the sheriff, to the Evangelistos, to the members of the commission, and on numerous occasions about violations regarding noise and bright lights. That building types are appropriate to the density and site relationship. Once again, a tent is inappropriate to the site relationship. there are adequate provisions for sewer and water systems, and of course, that's where we enter in because there is a well agreement on Lot P that was filed in 1991. The Evangelistos took it upon themselves in 2005 to go drill on our property a new well, saying that the old well was inadequate, even though there are no tests or water issues that stating that that well was inappropriate or inadequate or not meeting the needs of those who were using it. And in 2009, they capped the existing well. Two of the owners stayed on the original well in 2005 to 2009, but then the Evangelistos said that Pennington County said that they had to cap that well and abandon it. However, I've asked PJ for some clarification there regarding who in Pennington County made them cap that well and abandon it. I've talked with the state of South Dakota, Eric Gronlund, and he said that he's not sure that they have the ability or the that they can order that. So that is out there. We have a lawsuit pending on commercial use of the well on Lot P. We are convinced that the Evangelistos intend to use Lot P water for commercial uses because they've applied to DENR for a commercial permit in 2016. However, that has been on hold because of the well agreement. But they have asked for that permit. They have, we are sure, used it for their campground up there on Lot 7, and that they intend to use it. And then I did say, I did have some questions, and before I go on with my questions regarding the staff report and the conditions, I would really disagree with restricting the commission on number 43 and not allowing reviews of that condition on a regular basis. I think that is something that should not be. And I don't have, I'm at a disadvantage here because I did not get the handout that you just received before I got up here to speak. So I have no idea, I had no idea coming in here what conditions they wanted revised at this standing. But the conditions that I asked PJ to clarify on February 20th in an email, and I don't know if you had a copy of that, but I will go through them. And the first is condition number 5, that all natural drainage paths be continually maintained. And I asked the question, I said, are the Evangelistos required to abide by a comprehensive drainage plan? And if not, why not? Condition number 20, that the applicants apply with South Dakota Codified Law 2418. And PJ, what is that? 3418? I mean 3418. I believe it's bed and breakfast. Okay. Condition number 28, and this says that lots 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21, 28, 29, and 30 through 37 and 41 each allow the following with approved permits: single-family dwelling, vacation home rental, bed and breakfast, and specialty resort. Well, those are commercial uses of those lots, and the Evangelistos have said on several occasions that they intend to use water from Lot P for those purposes. And bed and breakfast and specialty resort then should be stricken from the use of those particular lots. On condition 29, that lot 7 allow for 3 recreational vehicles to include park models for use by family and friends of the PUD. That once again will be using Lot P water, and that's also included in there is bed and breakfast and specialty resort. That should be stricken. Lots 30, or condition number 30, that lots 19 and 22 each allow for one of the following with approved permits. Once again, bed and breakfast and specialty resort should be stricken. Lot 31, or condition 31, that lot 23B allow for one specialty resort and bed and breakfast, that should be stricken, as is condition number 30, that lot 27, same thing. Lot 33 as well. Lot 34, there's condition 34, that lot 45 be allowed for a specialty resort bed and breakfast. You're allowing way too much levity here. Condition 35, that lots 3 and 4 have a 0-foot setback on all interior lot lines, a 15-foot front and rear yard setback, and a 10-foot side yard setback. Can any of you explain to me why that condition would be allowed?
PJ, you're welcome to explain that one if you'd like, but I assume because the building or the property is crossing over the lines? I'm not sure, I can't tell.
What condition are we on?
She's on
35.
35.
The conditions that are in here are requests by the applicants and also working with the staff. The applicants either own most of the lots, or their family does, and this is the PUD and this is their request. They're allowed to request whatever setbacks they want. This was approved and already as a PUD. These are just reviews. The specific question of what they plan on doing with that lot, I think, would be best to the Evangelistos.
Okay, just trying to answer a question why they would request, that, well, you can in a PUD, you can request those lot lines to be changed or the setbacks and things of that nature. It's probably the simplest.
We're talking about 35?
35.
I mean, that's what a bed and breakfast is, so it probably corrected a violation, but.
Right.
Well,
it's
a developmental lot.
There you go.
But they are two separate tax parcels, so if they were ever separated,
Correct.
then you'd have a violation, so it fixes.
There you go.
Okay, so those were things that were of concern to my husband Dale and I and the neighbors. Are you aware of some of the disputes in the neighborhood between the Evangelistos and the neighbors? You are. Okay. So with that, I would certainly ask you to make those changes in especially the bed and breakfast and specialty resort conditions based on the water usage from the well on Lot P. And I thank you for your time and your service and appreciate being able to speak today.
Any questions for Peggy before she steps away?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Peggy, all of these references to vacation home rental or bed and breakfast and specialty resort, and the reason that you want those stricken is all based upon the premise, and I'm going to say premise because I don't think it's been determined yet, that they're going to use water from Lot P.
They have specifically stated that they are going to use water from Lot P in statements to the DENR, and also from their former attorney, Kent Haig, said that anything that they're using in the future will be using water from the Lot P well. And I do not, it is my assumption that they went in and capped the existing well and drilled a new well so that they could use that water for commercial purposes. And they applied to DENR for a permit to use that water for commercial purposes.
Did they drill a new well? They did drill a new well.
In 2005.
That's not on Lot P. That's not the
It
city
is on
water.
Lot P.
It is on Lot P. Okay.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions for Peggy? All right, thank you very much. Any other members of the audience like to speak on this item? Just a moment, sir, just in case there's somebody else. I want to give everybody an opportunity to speak first. Any other audience members like to speak on this item? All right, Mr. Allen, you're welcome to come back up.
Yeah, as I mentioned, there is a court matter dealing with I think this is on water rights. There is some confusion. I would say that's probably not for this board to have to determine. I think what they will find in circuit court that there are two water mains put in, one going to Lot 5, where all the commercial water goes to, which has a well use agreement for commercial water. Lot P, there was a new well drilled on that because the previous well was told to be capped. It was about 35 feet deep, and there were septic tanks, an old septic tank before the Evangelistos even moved in there, that was too close to it. And the guy that came out and inspected the septic tank says, cap that old well, don't just leave it. And they weren't using it because the water wasn't sufficient for these neighbors. So the Evangelistos put in a new well. I really don't want to belabor that, but if you have any issues about the water use, it's being used appropriately. I think their council has already learned that. But that's all to be dealt with in the circuit court.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions for any of the individuals that have already spoke or for staff? Well, I think we have some discussion to go on. Current recommendation is, their staff is looking for direction from us on PU 1603 due to the above mentioned concerns. So, is Jerome here? Did Jerome want to talk about any of the fire safety stuff, just out of curiosity? I thought I saw him step in earlier, but.
Yeah, he was just dropping off some documents. Unless he got called out on an emergency, he's in his office if you have any questions.
Does anybody want to have him, request him?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Kathy?
You know, I haven't really had an opportunity to read all of this, and so if you could just, if you or somebody could just sort of generalize, because my understanding now is, if you can correct me, is that within this document, there are some recommendations that he is suggesting that we add as conditions to the PUD, is that right?
So if Jerome's in the building, we're going to pull Jerome so he can interpret it. We just got it last night at 11:30-ish.
Yeah, I just would like a general sense of what it's,
Sure.
what it's about.
Mr. Chair?
Go ahead,
I
Lori.
guess until then, PJ, can you comment on the noise recommendation that the attorney for conditions 13 and 14?
Yeah,
That we should just restate they be in compliance with state law or strike those conditions? Is that something that staff is recommending or okay with?
Oh, sorry. In the conditions, we'll usually put in items that are of importance for a specific use. So yes, there are all the state laws out there. We don't list every one, just like our zoning ordinance, we don't list every one. There are specific uses that demand a reminder to the applicants of specific criteria. So that's why that's in there.
So if the PUD, it doesn't want as a whole quiet hours, you would just strike conditions 13 and 14?
I would not strike 14.
See, well, we discussed this last time, Lori. I think you and I were in agreement that, because it was going to apply for the whole PUD, we said, no, let's get rid of it because we didn't want all those other lots to be homes that could potentially be restricted.
Because it's like, I wouldn't live in a place that had quiet hours from 10 to 7.
Correct, and that's why.
I go to bed around 1 or 2, and if I want to sit out on my deck and entertain, I'm not living there.
Sure.
And it's not reasonable to expect guests leaving an event. They're going to make noise.
And staff agrees with you.
Yeah, that's why I would get rid of it.
Staff doesn't agree with you with that one.
Unless the PUD wants quiet hours. Unless that's something that the PUD wants.
The applicants, last I talked with them, said they do not, but they did say they did want to be treated like everybody else. And that was mainly with the allowing a tent for a long period of time. Well, everybody else also has quiet hours where we have conditional use permits and PUDs. And condition number 14 is limiting it. And if we take out lot 44, because the evangelists are correct, that's residential. If we take out lot 44 from number 14, those are the lots of immediate use for the bed and breakfast, the tent, and overflow parking if needed on lot 45. So it limited it only to those lots. It took it out of the entire PUD.
So you would strike condition 13 and keep 14 with the exclusion of lot 44?
I would change 13 to one of the options that they submitted that all the lots in the because noise has been a concern. For now, we keep it in until further reviews. Hopefully, we'll take it out.
So you just want to restate that all lots have to be compliant with state law?
Possibly their option 2 on the applicant's page 1.
Okay.
And on number 14, just strike out lot 44.
And you guys want quiet hours from 10 to 7?
Staff does, applicants do not.
Do any of the other residents in the nearby area are restricted to 10 to 7 quiet hours, just out of curiosity? Are any of the other properties in the immediate area restricted to 10 to 7 quiet hours?
No, because they don't have these other uses other than residential.
Kathy, go ahead.
I just, I think that quiet hours is a little bit subjective, and so it's, I kind of appreciate one of the options submitted by the Evangelistos to define them, and they're defined as amplified sounds for lots 3, 4, 10, 11, 12, and 45 will not be allowed after 10 p.m. on Sundays through Thursdays or after 11 p.m. on Fridays and Saturdays. Quiet hours will begin at those stated times each evening and end at 7 in the morning. I think that adds some definition about what quiet is. It refers to amplified sound.
Yep.
And so I guess that would be my preference too.
And that way you're not complaining about someone in the parking lot who's trying to slams their car door, and then now they're getting
Or they're
complained
talking
on.
loudly or
talking
Well,
loudly.
and it does add clarity, and I think there's some misunderstanding or ignorance of how the planning staff actually enforces these. We understand people leaving an event, cars starting, motorcycles starting. We get a complaint on that. You can't avoid that. We wouldn't bring a review before you or the board based on that. And there has been a lot of complaints that have come in that never triggered a review because we determined that it didn't need to.
Right. But I think even defining it, even for the locals in the area, so that they even understand that that's what the evangelistos are following under, that, at 10 o'clock, if you hear somebody talking loudly in the parking lot, it's not amplified sound, they're staying within that confine. So whenever they do complain, you even have it written out. Well, this is what they're following. I mean, I don't know. Yes, Kathy? Oh, does Nancy want to say something? Thank you, Kathy.
Nancy Evangelisto. One of the options on there is for the certain hours on Tuesday through or Monday.
That would be
through-
option 3, I believe. That's the one we're discussing.
Yep.
So that's what you guys want.
I really would like it to be the same all week, and my preference would have been 11 o'clock, as it says on here, not 10 o'clock.
So no amplified sound,
Amplified sound.
11 to
All
7.
amplified sound will be turned off by 11 o'clock, and all week, not, because as an event
Well, yeah, you could have a
planner,
Sunday
it's like,
wedding.
okay,
or-
wait,
yeah.
what day is this?
Yeah.
Oh, you can only do your event till 10 o'clock. That's my only concern. We have been really mindful of trying to keep the music turned off at 10 o'clock at this point. We've lost many events because of that. 11 o'clock is a little more reasonable. If you're going to a wedding, by 10 o'clock, a lot of those younger weddings, they're just getting wound up and ready to have a good time at that point. But by allowing them till 11 o'clock, I don't feel that's unreasonable. Do we do a lot of events during the week? No, it's minimal during the week. And the events that we do during the middle of the week, especially during the summer, are usually family reunion type events. They're not the weddings. Weddings are usually Friday, Saturday.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Mark.
Something's been mentioned a couple of times in these discussions about this particular piece of property, and it keeps coming back, and I want to clarify. The county doesn't enforce covenants. I don't think we can we, PJ? Am I correct?
That's legal.
Covenants are between the neighborhood and the people that live in the neighborhood. They don't have anything to do with the county. As long as they meet minimum county standards, we can't do anything about them. So just for future reference, when you talk about that they're not meeting this covenant or they're not meeting that covenant, unless it's below a minimum county standard, we can't do anything about that anyway. That's up to the homeowners association.
Peggy Gibson, once again. Dale and I also own a cabin on Edelweiss Mountain, and at one point in time, I was the president of the Property Owners Association on Edelweiss Mountain, and we definitely have some covenants that we as an association enforce. And I know that you can't enforce covenants. However, it was always my understanding that you can't prohibit the property owners from enforcing their covenants as well.
Correct, we
That's
can't.
correct. All right. Jerome is here now. If we have any questions for Jerome, if you'd like to come forward, please.
I don't believe that document was available to everybody. However, I do have a PDF version of it.
Jerome Harvey, Pennington County Fire Administrator. How may I help the commission today?
Any specific questions for Jerome? Did you have any?
Yeah, I don't have a specific question, but I guess I would just like you to more or less explain what your recommendation is.
Well, the structure that I looked at on the 7th, I've looked at and been involved in building and fire inspections for over 30 years. It's quite frankly one of the more stranger structures that I've ever seen. I've never seen one blended like this over 30 years of looking at buildings. The permanent section of the building, however that got permitted, and Dan and I talked more about that building. That part seems to be of good grade and construction. I don't see any real issues with the actual permanent section of the building. In my looking at this, my dilemma to you guys is you making the decision whether this is a permanent structure or not. My understanding is the permanent section of the building is 800 square feet, and the overall structure with the membrane and tent's 4,000 square feet. So it looks to me like the overall larger size of the building or the structure is a temporary or membrane structure. And I cannot find any place that allows a temporary membrane or tent type structure to stay up more than 180 days without a permit. I think the only fair way to look at this is the fact that the smaller section is permanent, the larger square footage is temporary and membrane, therefore it should fall underneath of that. And the commission, the planning commission and the county commission should treat the structure as such and not be permitted more than 180 days in the 12-month calendar year.
Just out of curiosity, Jerome, since you've had all this fire training and you're the fire chief here, what would that do, taking it down and putting it back up to that fire rating that has been given to that tent?
You won't. The evangelistas have done a very nice job of following the Title 19 standards and NFPA standards that relates to membrane structures, and that is inherently flame resistant to the Title 19 standard, which is the gold standard. Now, eventually, sun, wear and tear, et cetera, on the tent, just in its natural lifespan, will break down.
Correct.
That doesn't mean that direct flame impingement, extreme radiant heat, or whatever will do that, but they've put up a fairly nice barrier around the property. You can see that in several of their pictures in the property that I looked at the day that we were there. But there is recommendations in here, standard recommendations as far as meeting drip test and melting of the membrane. It won't carry a flame. It will melt. It will. It would melt or drip, but it won't carry the flame in such a Hollywood style fashion as you would see an old 50s movie as far as the circus tent burning around.
So you're telling me you don't think any taking down of that tent membrane would actually cause any degradation of the membrane and the protective coating or anything of that nature?
If it would, then it would violate the Title 19 NFPA standards because they address all that in there. That's already addressed for you.
Just so you're aware, I mean, I'm a little bit familiar with military tents that have to meet the same thing. And we know that after we take them down 3 different times, it's actually starting to reduce the effectiveness of that barrier. So that's why I'm trying to ask these questions to get some understanding. Because I know even in our, really thick tents in the military, they're designed to go up and down. But after a certain amount of time, we realize that they're going to break down a little bit.
I think your problem would be there is the fact of degradation of the material staying up over a large period of time and being exposed to the sun, the wind, the outdoor elements. That's where your degradation comes from. I'm not taking away from what you're saying there. But the question remains, really in my mind, was it a permanent structure or is it not? The indications from talking to Mr. Evangelisto and looking at the documentation on the pad and stuff, it's definitely poured. The whole thing's poured for a permanent structure such as that. So if you want a permanent structure, then it should be one. If it stays in the hybrid configuration that it is now, then to me it's a temporary structure.
Any questions?
It's up to the commission
So
to
to be
decide.
clear, the 180 days that you quote, that's not from Pennington County's rules.
No, that's everything that I can find on temporary membrane structures. Nobody that I can find permits that more than 180 days.
So how would you handle greenhouses that are the soft materials and they
Well, again, a greenhouse is not occupied by 150 people or more. It's not an occupied structure. It's a completely different setting. There you have, 1 to 2, 3 people that are working inside of the structure. It doesn't have the in and out of the people. It doesn't have the issues as far as people being in there on a low light setting, having food and some of the other stuff that's done in a normal banquet type setting as far as flammables exposed to that. And that's the difference in that. It's not necessarily whether or not the tent's going to burn down or not. It's whether the people in a low light setting in an unfamiliar building can get in or out of here. It's the same situation that you have here. Shut the lights off in this building, fill this room full of smoke. 90% of the people in this room will go out the door that they came into. The rest of you will find another way out. So the question comes down, and the evangelistal's challenge to this is making sure that if something goes wrong inside of this structure, that they can get out. It has nothing to do with the rest of it.
Go ahead, Mark. I think Mark was wanting to ask a question. Sorry.
Would that not be addressed by exit lights and signs?
That's correct. Yeah, and that's what our recommendation in here. And when I talked with Dan, they didn't have any issue. They seemed like they were headed with that. I know there's a tendency to, roll the tent up on the one end and everybody can exit the building. The question is, so it's June in the Black Hills, and where's the tent going to be? Not all the doors will be up. You still have to have exit lighting to show people to get out, and then you have the permanent section of the building there.
Okay.
They still need to be lit and get out.
Then the other question I had for you is, you address cooking instruments and no open flame within 20 feet of the tent or membrane structures. Is that addressed, Jerome, by the fact that their kitchen is within that permanent structure?
Well,
because it's still closer to the membrane than 20 feet.
Yeah, the permanent section of the building is confined by at least 1 hour sheetrock. And there's been no indication to me from evangelistals nor the equipment that we saw on site that day that they were trying to set up a permanent kitchen. Okay. My understanding is all the food will come up from another building and be delivered in a banquet type fashion. Okay. So the only thing that they're using is the little heaters and such inside the building, but he hasn't indicated that he's going to set up a big flaming barbecue outside of the building at all, have you? So, okay. Yeah, that's
okay,
what.
All right.
There's in that commission that balances that thing between the flaming barbecue and the little things that keep
Bunsen burners.
Yeah, thank you.
All right.
I'd just like to follow up a little bit. So what from a fire perspective, what is gained for requiring this tent to only have 180 days every year? What is gained from a fire safety perspective?
Well, again, in fact, it's a temporary structure. It's a membrane structure. The structure would allow you to. That's the thing with this particular structure, or how it was allowed to evolve into being part of the permanent structure, and then the temporary structure was built into the permanent section there, and we show you some photos on that. That to me remains the dilemma that the commission has to resolve, is I personally have never ever seen that, and I've looked at thousands of buildings in my time, as far as not just here, and I've never ever seen, and I've been in lots of urban interface incidents, I've never once seen a permanent section of a building built into a temporary membrane like this. That's the dilemma that you have to resolve.
But I mean, I guess, so really there's no advantage that you...
There's strictly no advantage, to my mind, there's no advantage of keeping the tent section up. That needs to be separated from that. That's your problem, is the membrane structure has been encased into the permanent structure. That clearly needs to be separated for maintenance reasons and upkeep of it, because it's not built, that membrane structure is not built as a permanent structure. That's the question when it comes down to it.
What's the advantage to taking it down? Maybe that's the better question. What's the advantage to taking it down from a fire safety perspective?
What would be gained taking it down every year and putting it back up the next year?
Well, I don't know how to answer that for you. Again, the jurisprudence on a body law indicates that, again, that nobody allows a structure to stay up like this. Why wouldn't you take it down? It's a tent and membrane structure, would need to be inspected, so on and so forth. As far as the material, degradation of material, we already got an indication from Travis here as far as what happens in the military setting with that material. It's very similar to that. Degradation of that material would occur that would allow an inspection of that to take place.
Any further questions? Okay, go ahead, Mark.
If I'm remembering correctly from our meeting in May of 2017, the evangelistos presented us with some material regarding this tent, this structure. And in those materials, basically this particular type of tent was constructed and manufactured to be left up for up to 20 years, according to what the material that we read, that we were given.
Yeah, and going back to the question about the fire part of it, again, it comes back to whether or not you're gonna allow a temporary building to evolve into a permanent building.
Right, okay,
Yeah.
I got you.
Okay. Any further questions, Lori?
I guess the closest thing I can think of to these buildings are like those bunkers you see, that are concrete and then they have this stuff attached. I used to work for the DOT and you have, those ones they set up to do the sand.
Yes,
But they're like a three-sided
they're
thing.
not occupied though.
And they're not an occupied
Yeah,
building.
it's not an occupied structure there.
But that material is put up there for some period of time. They don't take that membrane up and down.
Yeah, completely different occupancy of the building.
It's not an occupancy, but
That's
still the
correct.
material's designed to stay there for some period of time, and then you replace that part
And
of it.
when the roof burns off, nobody's in the building. It doesn't affect anybody. This one would be a completely different situation.
This is enclosed.
Correct, it's enclosed, and how do you get out of there?
Okay.
So,
Any further questions for Jerome? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Any further questions before moving forward?
Peggy Gibson, once again. The neighbors have put together, Danelle and Robbie Clausen, a video of what goes on in the neighborhood with the tent. And I have to publicly ask that it be played for the Planning Commission. So I'm doing that at this time.
How long is it?
20, 30 seconds. I think there's two of them.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought you were saying
I was just
20,
saying-
30 minutes.
If you're going to tell me 20, 30 minutes, I'd be like, well, no, I think it's
Yeah,
What
hours.
about the volume? These are the two?
Yes.
I don't know how the volume is.
And Peggy, in your view, what's going on here?
Is that a car that went by?
Peggy, in your view, since
It's a party in the
Okay.
tent.
Yeah, she's working on the sound from the computer right now.
And this would be from Danelle and Robbie Clausen's residence.
Okay.
It's right across the road.
She's working on it.
And just out of curiosity, what time was this?
Does that have a timestamp?
I would assume it's past the hours that it's supposed to be,
Well,
but I'm not.
Great party video.
All the volumes on the computer are as high as they'll go.
okay. And then the other one?
Let's hear that well. And you can't get it up any higher, Joan? No?
Is this the same party?
Looks like it. Similar. It's the announcer.
What are we talking about for distance here? The first one looked like it must be about close to a city block away. This one looks like it may be a little closer, but
Their house is right across the road.
yeah, but how big a distance is that? I don't know.
Taylor Ranch Road?
No, across Summer Creek Inn Road.
So right across there.
Lot 8 versus lots 3 and 4.
8 is that X, is that correct?
Correct.
Texas, yeah.
Yeah.
So that,
It
see
would
that
be-
road right,
Below the 7.
Is it
Yes,
this
below
guy?
the 7, the X
below
right
the
below
7.
7. Not that one, PJ, or whoever's.
Oh, I'm just, okay, sorry.
Oh.
That one.
Let me move that.
Yep. Point to the one right below 7, PJ, the X, right there.
Right below 7.
I mean, that's like across the street, it's like across 2 streets.
Yep.
Distance, roughly.
Yep.
Okay. All right, any further questions?
Could you guys describe the lighting? Because I can see that you have like lights that outline the eaves on the inn, and then it
It's
looks
all
like,
around- it
and
goes
then
all
it
around
looks
the bed
like
and
you
breakfast.
have, I was asking the evangelist, it looks like you have lighting that is around the perimeter of the tent. Could you describe the type of lighting? I mean, I realize that the stuff inside is like, you know, it sounds like you have a DJ and there's flashing lights and stuff like that.
Nancy Evangelisto. The perimeter lighting is low-intensity, like Christmas light bulbs.
Like landscape lighting?
And landscape lighting, correct.
Okay.
You're correct, on the inside is lighting that the DJ has provided. One thing to note, this is on the windows that you're seeing with the purple lighting. That is on
Clear?
the clear, yep. That is on the parking lot side, which does face Clausen's. One of the things that we have talked about is putting the solid panels so they would not even see any of that lighting. So the only lighting that would be visible are those little white ones, which are low-intensity lighting.
And then the lighting that's on the eaves of the Summer Creek Inn is on a timer?
No,
Okay, and so,
I don't know where the timer thing came.
Okay.
Because we have people coming in at all different hours. We try and have those lights turned off by 11 at the latest.
okay.
But
So you rely on someone turning those lights on when it gets dark and turning them off when they go to bed at night?
Correct.
Okay.
Could they be put on a timer? We could.
Because I know there've been some questions about that. There's no timer, it's just you turn them on, you turn them off.
Right, because we have people that, you know, their flights come in at 11:30, 12 o'clock at night, and it's really dark out there at certain times. So it is a low-intensity way of showing people where we're at. The intensity of those lights compared to the post lights that the utility company provides. Those actually put out a much higher intensity light than what we have on the perimeter of our building.
So they're similar to like what people put up for Christmas?
Correct.
A Christmas
And
tree
actually,
lighting.
several of the neighbors have the exact same type lighting, LED Christmas
Okay,
lights on
right.
their porch, because it is a lower intensity.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I got a quick question for you both. Have y'all at least had a chance to see the recommendations from Jerome on the fire side of
Have
things?
not. Well, but this morning, because of the snow, as I was pulling that up, I got just the initial part of the email. All the recommendations, I got one photo and a couple red arrows, but that's all I got. So we have not seen any of those recommendations.
Okay. Do y'all allow smoking in the tent?
No, we're totally a non-smoking facility.
Okay. That's just one of the ones that came into mind
So
for me.
there's no smoking even on your entire property?
Correct. If they are going to smoke, the only place they can smoke is on the parking lot.
Which is gravel?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
One other quick side note, I just wanted to add that there is no building ordinance or guidelines within Pennington County, and if you look at the Pennington County zoning and ordinance book under definition of building.
Permanent structure.
Yeah, this tent structure meets every definition of that in their own zoning and ordinance book.
Okay.
The other thing that I wanted to make note of is I've talked with PJ on, there are no set guidelines for tents of this stature. We have volunteered our service to work with a committee and come up with viable guidelines for that. And we were told that that wouldn't happen for at least 2 years. And now we're hearing that we're close to having some of those guidelines. I know there's several community members that would like to be involved with coming up with a comprehensive plan for that.
Mr. Chair.
All right, go ahead, Mark.
I think one of the primary concerns with the fire situation is exits. That seems to be what Jerome was focused on more than anything else, was people know how they're going to get out. And
Right.
he's addressed that with you, and you've agreed to put up exit lights and that
We
kind of.
briefly spoke about it when he visited the site. I have
Okay.
not been given any guidelines to what would appease the fire marshal or not. I did tell him during summertime events, there's probably over 50 feet of open wall around the area where people have the reception. So, I mean, it's half the tent's open. I mean, so that's not an issue. During winter hours or winter season, we would have to designate the 3 locations that would be open for that. But
The other thing to point out is the state comes out and does an inspection twice a year on this facility for health and safety. They will be out twice a year because we meet all of the state requirements. And currently, the bed and breakfast and the specialty resort areas, those are inspected 3 times a year. So if we're out of compliance, there's already a safety measure in place that we're being inspected. And if we're out of compliant, it's out there for the public, and that's not good for us if we're not compliant.
Gotcha.
Fair enough. Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Any further?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I guess I'd like to just ask, again, Commissioner DeSanto. You said that the original intent back in May, from your understanding at the county board, was this is a permanent structure?
If I remember correctly, that's what we were leaning towards.
Okay.
The reason to wait and see what happened during the wintertime and whether or not there was degradation of the materials or if the snow load caused any issues or that type of stuff was to determine whether or not we were going to decide that we would permit this as a permanent structure.
And when we sent it to you, I think that was our recommendation. The reason why we didn't make a determination is we wanted to see, and I think it went to
Held
you
up for the
guys
winter.
and see how it held up
Yeah.
for the winter and whatnot. So I agree. All right, any further discussion on this? Currently, the recommendation is that staff is looking for direction from us on this particular item. So they've given us specific recommendations. So that's going to be for us to make a determination how we're going to move forward with any kind of motions.
Mr. Chair, can I ask PJ
Go ahead,
just
Lori.
one more question? You said that that staff is working on an ordinance that would apply to membrane structures or temporary structures?
I'm writing one because what we have found in all the committees that we've had to do is it's better to start with a template instead of a blank slate. So the plan is to write one, bring it before the planning commission, say, here we go, this is what we're going to request. Could you make a recommendation to the board? And the recommendation will probably be for a committee, and it's going to take
a while.
a long time. Yes.
And just so I understand, if we do go ahead and permit this as a permanent structure per the county board intent, you would not retroactively apply this. It'd be like another, like the grandfather facility. You can't retroactively apply an ordinance to a structure and say, well, we permitted it as permanent, but now we've got this membrane ordinance, now you have to comply with all this.
It would be treated as a permanent building, so once it comes down, then the new ordinance would apply.
When they have
when they take it down.
Okay.
Yep.
Just clarification on taking down. You do only mean taking the entire structure down. If the framing stays up, just like a home, if you take away the sidewalls and replace the sidewalls, now granted, if they're going to go big hard structures or something of that nature, they would have to have a building permit. But if they're going to replace the sidewalls with something that's, you can't see the lights through it, that would just be replacing a sidewall, like if I was replacing the siding on my home.
Just maintenance or that
Yeah,
kind of stuff
when
would
they
not
start-
trigger the new ordinance.
When they start adding new rooms and adding on as they want to make it permanent, then that's when it's no longer treated as legal nonconforming prior to that ordinance.
Gotcha. Michelle's got an input here, I can see.
Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office. I just want to clarify the applicability of any future ordinance. Commissioner Litzen is correct that it would be considered a legal nonconforming use, so the use of the continued use of the tent would be permitted. However, the ordinance, however it's drafted, may impose certain conditions of operation such as exit signs, maybe fireproofing, and those conditions of any future ordinance could apply to the ongoing use of that tent. We just couldn't say, no, you can't use that tent any longer, because
It's not
actual
a
use
permanent
would be
structure.
legal nonconforming.
And when that happens, what we do is incorporate them in as conditions, and either they're approved or they're not approved. And we've done that with the vacation home rentals. We've slowly moved the more current vacation home rental ordinance into the older ones to bring them together. And again, the agents, the landowners, everybody has a chance to say no to them or protest to them, but they get approved.
Do you have a?
I'd like to just, if I may. please.
Go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah. You know, we've talked about the suggested changes that were brought forward by the Evangelistos. We've talked about 13 and 14. We've talked about 27, which is really the tent issue. The one that I'd like to ask a little bit about is 43. And I'd like to understand too a little bit about these review processes because, one thing that I think that, we can all agree on is that we can't do business in this county without some sort of a, understanding that we're going to be in business tomorrow.
Right.
This idea of having so much uncertainty is not the climate for doing business in Pennington County. And so my understanding was always that reviews, whether it be a conditional use permit, whether it be a PUD, was really to review it to ensure that the conditions were being met. And that if they weren't being met, then we could talk about that. But you can't just review them and decide that, oh, I don't like this PUD and do away with it without, if they were in full compliance of all the conditions, you can't just do away with it under a review. And so I do think that there needs to be some clarity offered as to what these reviews really, what their purview is, what the sidebars are. So from your perspective, PJ, what's your understanding of it?
I think you're bringing up what happened at the board level when the PUD was not approved for continuation, which essentially ended it. The Board of Commissioners have that authority to do that. They chose to reverse that because I don't think when they made that motion, they didn't understand the implications, so they reversed that. The PUD is, the conditions, the reviews are to check to make sure that they are meeting the conditions. Over the years, we've also found out that we needed to add in on complaint basis. Again, those complaints are vetted before they come up to review. And we've also added in that it's either at the recommendation of a planning commission or the Board of Commissioners, because those other options weren't in for a review. And so the only thing that was, you had to wait until the year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years or whatever it is. So over the time, in discussions with the planning commission from probably, 3 years ago, I'm thinking, those different avenues for review are added in. Now, this one specifically, just like a conditional use permit, after it's reviewed, it's initially reviewed 1 year later. Because this one has been so back and forth as far as the times for reviews, and we're changing conditions so much, staff, I am recommending a review in 1 more year. Now, for same thing with conditional use permits and PUDs, and the staff, is you earn the right for a longer review. It's just not automatically given to you, because if there's multiple complaints, if there's multiple issues, if there's multiple non-compliance with conditions, then we want to catch that as early as possible. Now, conditional use permits, they have a different state law that they can end after a certain period of time. So we review them within a year to make sure that the landowner knows and is aware that they're trying to establish that use.
But the sidebars on the review are to review compliance with the conditions.
Yes, and then make a recommendation. Correct.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Lori.
Kathy, you might want to note that, remember those earlier ones we talked about, the vacation home rentals? Those have a 3-month review period on them. That's in the
Some of them
condition.
do.
Some of them do, and the reason for that was because it was, a company that we had some questions about, and so we kind of wanted to see how they're doing in 3 months. And then I remembered other ones that had like a year review, and then after they'd done the year review, there were some that had 2 or 3 year review.
Correct.
That, we decided, well, there've been no complaints, there's no problem with this, let's remove that condition. And that's kind of how we functioned as a group. We as a group have decided that, if something continues to be in compliance, there's no reason to continue that review at some frequency. Like PJ was saying, they've earned.
You're in the right.
Yeah.
Yeah. PUDs are a little different than conditional use permits, because in PUD, the applicants, landowners, are basically creating their own zoning district. So they request the uses, they request the setbacks, and so that's why you see those type of conditions in here. Also, there's a lot of conditions. There are actually, I believe, 59 originally, because one of the things that we worked with the evangelistos to do was incorporate some of the covenants into it. A lot of those conditions have been taken out through discussions that the evangelistos have had with the boards and the planning commission over time. So we're down to the 43. So the reviews are things that we do with everybody.
Just a quick question, just for the sake of time. It's been a little over 2 hours. Has anybody parked in 2-hour parking where they need to move?
I think so.
Just determining whether we need to.
Is that up in front? Is that 2-hour parking up
No.
in front? Okay,
No.
then I'm good.
No.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Thanks.
So no one gets a ticket. Boy, that would look really bad. All right, any further questions? I know we have a lot to discuss. I mean, there's some things that I would like to add on the conditions, but I think some of these conditions can be adjusted slightly as well. And unless anybody has anything that they would like to address specifically, I will kick this thing off by adding a couple. Go ahead. So the exit lights, the statement in there about the exit lights from Jerome, I know you guys have already talked about it, and so that's something that you guys are on board with, so I just would like to put that in here. Jerry, do you have a copy of the wording for the exit lights?
Don't you want exit lights and signs?
And signs, yes, yes.
Okay.
Well, I was just talking about, it says exit lights, and I just didn't read the whole thing to do it.
Use that word.
Basically, the wording that Jerome gave us on the exit lights and signs, let us just put them in. Oh, come forward, then.
Exit lights and signs or lighted exit signs?
So,
'Cause
yes,
like
they just
current-
asked me the same thing. It's gonna be what was requested here, exit lights and signs. So I may say exit lights, but knowing that that's what we're talking about here, we'll get it all fulfilled in there so you know what we're dealing with when we kind of touch through these. Sorry. Jerry, do you have that wording over there? And anybody have any concerns with that particular wording?
Just for clarification for Ms. Evangelisto, I think when he refers to signs, he's referring, to a placard that's on a door, that type of sign. That's the difference. A lighted exit sign above the door and.
Correct, there's emergency exit lighting.
Right.
That's like what you guys have up there.
Right.
And then there's lighted exit signs.
placard.
A placard.
Yeah.
The challenge is the whole side of the tent opens, so where do you put these? Where do you classify as the door? So that's where it gets into an area that's a little bit challenging. Can it be addressed? Absolutely, and we don't have a problem. And that's actually one of the state, when they come out to inspect, that's one of the things they're looking at. So to put another condition on us is kind of
I guess
redundant.
where I'm looking at is whenever I went out there and visited and Dan was walking me through the backside, you've got all that, that, I don't know, the planter, if you went out
The
that back
patio
way,
areas?
No, the backside, we've got all the plants and the stair stepped, I don't know what it's
Retaining
called.
wall.
The retaining wall.
Retaining wall.
You don't want somebody
Walking.
barreling out that way. So
Yeah.
if you have, at least in the front, the signage that this is the way to exit in the middle of something, that's more of the direction because you don't want them going out the back, unzipping the plastic wall and then going off the edge in the dark and then now they don't
Sure.
see anything. That,
Yeah.
as long as you're giving a designation is what I'm
Okay.
looking at in that aspect. Did you have something to add, Lori?
Yeah, so what does the state, when the state does their inspection, what's their comment about, you say, well, this whole end is open? That's adequate
They have not been out yet because we haven't finished
with the tent yet? Okay.
The kitchen and bathroom area. That actually is now to a stage where we can have the state come out, and they're on my list to call and go ahead and have them come out, which we don't actually have to do. They just kind of randomly show up 3 times out of the year. But we are going to do a phone call and request that they come out while we're at this stage. So if there is anything that they are requiring additionally, we can address it now.
Okay. Fair enough. Any further questions on that particular item?
So, one way you could possibly word it, since you're not sure of where to put it, is the location of exit lights and signs as directed by the Pennington County Fire Administrator.
Any thoughts on that?
Makes sense.
Yeah, it's fine.
He knows what he needs.
Okay. The other one that I'm looking at, and I believe I saw them when I was out there, but just more of a condition to make sure you have them out there, is those portable fire extinguishers that meet the criteria. I'd like to see that in here. It's just kind of that extra reminder. I know you're doing it because you believe in that safety, but it's just one of those things we can show. Yep. Those were the two big ones for me. Knowing that the property is already smoking shall not be permitted on the entire property. I don't think you need to clutter a tent with no smoking signs when the whole entire property, for the exception of the parking lot, is a no smoking campus. The other thought from my perspective is what we talked about. Kathy was on it with this option 3 and the amplified sound and the adjustments that we did there for item 13.
14.
Well, option 3 says item 13, and
Well,
then 14 would be omitted. So 13 would change the wording, and then 14 would would be omitted.
Yeah, I thought 13 was going to be that all lots have to be compliance with the state law, and 14 was going to be no amplified sound from 11 PM to 7 AM
Right, that's the way.
Oh, is that what it,
for the resort lots.
I was looking at off of this, which is option 313, and then 14 would be omitted. So maybe I misunderstood,
Right.
but
From the notes that I have from when we were talking is condition 13 was going to be option 2.
was going to be option 2.
Mhm.
I think we initially said that, but I think
Well, I think the reason you just want to state that, you wanted to state that, all lots need to be in compliance with it, just to emphasize it, right?
Because of the number of noise complaints that we have
Yeah.
had, we find it necessary to put in
Yeah.
as a reminder.
But then in addition to that, the PUD wanted to establish quiet hours for the B&B and the tent from 11 to 7 AM and define that you could have no amplified sound during those quiet hours.
And that was option 3, and I believe Ms. Evangelista wanted to change it, to 11 instead of
11
10
to 7,
as listed.
yeah.
And I'm in agreement with that.
Yeah,
You are or
because
not?
10 is really early.
it is. And so I get what you're saying. This is probably where I missed it. So option 2, the wording of 13 for 13, but the option 3 was take the 13 out, was basically renumbered to 14 because it ultimately covered the same thing that 14 was. That's what it was that I missed in that conversation.
Yeah, I don't think we want to eliminate
there-
either one
okay.
of those. I think
Okay.
we want to just reword them.
So condition 13 being that the intensity and duration of sound from any and all sources from within lots PU 1603 are in compliance with South Dakota Codified Law 221835 is what we wanted for 13.
Put all lots.
Yeah, all
Yeah,
lots.
yeah.
And then for 14, if I remember correctly, and y'all can 100% correct me if I'm wrong, is that the option 3 wording, for the exception of some changes, which was removing the Sunday through Thursday, amplified sound for lots 3, 4, 10, 11, 12, and 45 will not be allowed after 11 o'clock on all days. So basically,
Or Monday through Friday,
yeah, Monday,
or Monday through.
Sunday through
Sunday,
Saturday,
yeah.
yeah, Sunday through Saturday.
It's all daily.
Quiet hours will begin at these stated times each evening and end at 7 AM on the following morning. Is that what I understood that we discussed?
So instead of doing 10 o'clock on the work days and 11 o'clock on the weekends, we're just going to do all days.
11 o'clock all week.
For amplified.
Sound.
What other type of sound would there be then?
People closing car doors.
I know that, yeah.
In the
I know.
parking lot.
That's why I
Well,
don't,
amplified has to go through a speaker like this is.
well, that's
so
why I
it-
don't think you can say quiet hours. Instead of using the term quiet hours, just say there will be no amplified sound from 10 AM to 7, from 10 PM to 7 AM daily on these particular on this list of lots.
You want it from 10 or do you want it from 11?
I'm sorry, 11.
Okay.
From 11 PM to 7 AM, there will be no amplified sounds on lots 3, 4, 10 through 12, and 45.
Because quiet,
Daily.
because quiet hours would fall back underneath the previous one, number 13, which is falling in line with our
Well, quiet hours, there is no something called a quiet hour. You just have to be in compliance with state law.
state law.
So
Gotcha.
no use of radios. If somebody's out there playing an instrument without a
That's not
amplified.
amplified. Yeah.
I know, I'm just,
Well, yeah, I mean.
for the
you-
record, I'm
I mean,
defining
you-
what the planning
you
commission
don't wanna
wants when this
keep
goes
people
forward.
from sitting out on their deck and listening to their iPhone. Come on.
I-
And playing a guitar?
I
Come
know.
on. Who would want to live there?
We're the staff that has to deal with your decisions, so we're just trying to get clarity of what you're
But
looking
someone could go
for.
sit in the road and do the same thing, open their car door, turn on their radio and
Oh, sure,
do that.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And what would you do? You would call the appropriate authorities and complain. I mean, it's either way, it's, I mean, there's give and
Yeah.
take one way or the other, but you
Yeah.
gotta call the appropriate authority.
Yeah.
Those were the big ones that I honed in on. I know there was a lot of other things in here that we discussed about. We already talked about condition 43. Are there any other suggestions or thoughts or edits to any of these conditions?
Do we need to do something with condition 27 that allows it to be a permanent tent? Do we want to
So I-
address the permanent?
So it was
of the
listed in
tent?
there as a permanent. I took it out, not knowing which way you were gonna go, so it was, that way it's just tent.
Anybody here not interested in making it permanent? Just out of curiosity. I'm leaning towards permanent because it looks like a permanent structure. It can hold up. I believe it's designed to be put up for 20 years, 15, 20 years. That's the way I'm leaning, but anybody have any?
It appears to be the same material they used in the Denver airport,
Yeah.
which is gonna last a long
Which has been
time,
there more
and the
than
wind's not gonna
20.
blow it.
Really?
Yeah.
There's something like this in the Denver
Oh,
airport?
yeah, it's all those things
All
are
the-
those,
The whole roof.
Oh, is that what that little, oh, so
yeah.
it's made out of this stuff?
the
Yeah.
boots, the-
Oh, I did not know that.
And how long has that been there?
I don't know.
They had to do some repairs on it, but it's after
Yeah.
25 years.
Yeah.
My view is that since there's no restrictions in terms of the types of building materials that can be used. We don't have any laws that say that we can't use these kind of materials. And so since they're not prohibited, I don't see how we can not consider them to be a viable material for a permanent structure. I just, because there's nothing that says they're prohibited.
Which is why we've spent so much time on the public health, safety, and welfare side of it, because that is what we do have in our ordinance that we have to fall back on when we don't have an ordinance to cover something like this. That's why it's being vetted so much.
And again, the intent is to use this 52 weeks a year. I mean, that's the intent. They're very upfront saying, we want to run a business here. We don't want to say, no, we can't operate from here to here because our tent's down. They want to be able to take your reservation any day of the year and have an event so that they can stay in business. Right? They're real upfront about that.
Oh,
It's permanent.
I'm not objecting to that.
Yeah, okay.
Michelle, did you have some input since you walked up here after we said that? So that's just my trigger is when Michelle walks up here after I say something, oh, well, she's got some input.
Actually, I'd like to address condition 13 with regard to, or maybe it's 14 with regard to the hours of operation. Certainly, that's a decision of this planning commission. I would like to note that one of the purposes of some of these conditions is to hopefully avoid conflict between the neighbors. And as someone who often has to be in work between 6:30 and 7 a.m., if on Sunday to Thursday there was loud music playing after 10 o'clock, that certainly would cause myself consternation when I've got limited, I have to be up early. So it's ultimately this body's decision, but I just wanted to throw out the fact that, Sunday, I think the reason Mr. Smoot originally proposed the 10 o'clock, 10 to 7 on Sunday through Thursday was recognizing the fact that those are nights, work nights. People are maybe going to bed a little earlier because they have to get up and get to work. So it's your decision. I just wanted to, just point that out, that is a consideration.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mark.
when I'm thinking about this, I'm thinking about the number of days per year that this is going to be an issue. And I think that in any neighborhood you live in, my neighborhood, your neighborhood, anybody's neighborhood, you're going to wind up with somebody on occasion having a party and being loud till late and on a Wednesday or whatever. And I think that restricting that for a business is a little tough for the.
I agree. And being someone who's worked in the hospital, I've worked many varied shifts. And guess what? I might be in bed at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, but that sure doesn't stop someone from having their party in the afternoon
Right.
just because that's my sleep hours. I mean, that's one of the things that I've looked at through my entire career as well. So I don't know. You're right. It's a business though. So I'm either way. I'm either at 10 o'clock Sunday through Thursday, 11 o'clock on the weekends, but I'm also okay with 11 o'clock either way. So it's,
And you know what I think.
and I know what you think.
So.
Yeah, I don't have too strong feelings about this, but I also think if the event center, the tent, is only occupied, if there's only events there 30, maybe at the outside 40 times a year, and even a very small subset of those are ones that run late at night, and even most of them are on Saturdays, I would presume. I just don't see that it's would represent a problem having them set at 11.
Yeah, 11's early.
All right. Any other inputs, discussion on this? Those were mine. If there's,
Mr. Chair, just one, if You're asking about all the conditions in general?
I was asking about all the conditions, because there was a lot of them that, there were things in there. I know we talked about the tent, we're all leaning towards permanent, so item number 27, I would say permanent tent. Yep, just so y'all are aware, that's what I'm thinking. Outside of that, I mean, I know there was other concerns on some of these other ones, but I
just wanted to state that I'd agree with the applicant's recommendation to remove condition 24. That would be 42
oh wait,
conditions.
is that the one with the backing up of the road?
Nope, that was taken out before the staff report.
This has to do with parking.
Okay, so you're
So
you're
24
saying,
can come out, it's covered other places.
okay,
And just so we understand, now they will file for a building permit for the tent as a permanent structure.
This still has to go before the board.
But yeah, okay.
And then if the board approves it, then they
Then
file for a
building.
permanent.
Okay.
okay. Any further questions, comments, discussions? Anyone from the audience? Last shot. All right, there is no current recommendation at this point in time, except for the staff would like direction. I think we've kind of gone through some of the concerned issues. I would entertain a motion if there happens to be one of either all the edits that we've done, or if there were to be a new motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to approve continuation of PU 1603 with the following changes. Number 13, to state that the intensity and duration of amplified sound, striking from all and any and all sources, from lots 3, 4, 10, 11, 12, and 45, are in compliance with South Dakota codified law. That number 14, remove lot 44 and change the hours for Sunday through Thursday, 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., and Friday and Saturday from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. For number 24, to remove this condition and replace it with exit lights and signs as discussed. And for number 27, to add the word permanent for tent.
Any other additions?
I'll second it, but I'd like to ask the person for discussion. I think we missed a couple things.
Aye. Motion and seconded, but yes, for discussion. I do believe we did miss some stuff in there, but he may not want that.
Yeah.
But at least we can discuss it to see if it was accidental or whatnot. Michelle has a question.
Yeah, Michelle Hoffman, State's Attorney's Office, and I may be incorrect. I thought 13 was just simply that, the intensity and duration of sound, whether amplified or other. So it would be that the intensity and duration of sound from any and all sources from the lots specified are in compliance with all South Dakota-fied laws, and that 14 would be no amplified sound for lots, the specified lots, from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m.
And except for 13, 13 applies to all lots in the PUD, just not the lots. It applies to everyone in the PUD, just not the listed lots.
Sonny, was that your intent? Just to make sure we're,
Well, we had some different opinions on some of these things. That
Okay.
was my opinion. I'm happy to hear any other changes.
Mr.
Okay.
Chair,
yes, Mark?
Sonny, just to clarify, in your motion, you did say 10 p.m. Did you
Yes,
want to
I
say 10
meant to say
p.m.?
10 for weekdays, Sunday through
Okay.
Thursday, and 11 for Friday, Saturday.
And then also, I guess I'd like to state that your replacement condition for number 24, I think you missed the fire extinguishers.
I did want to ask,
Okay.
was that intended to be an additional condition, or is that already covered under normal law?
I think we talked about
Talked about it
including
as
it
being
as you know, exit lights and signs and fire extinguishers provided per the county fire recommendations.
As a single condition?
It
all
could be,
three of
yeah.
those things?
Yeah,
Then-
it could
then
be.
yes, I would agree to add the fire extinguishers element to that one as well.
Okay. Any further discussion on this item? There has been a motion and a second for discussion. There's some discussion about differencing of thought on what was intended, but Sonny made it clear what his intent is. Any further discussion?
Well, I would like to offer a substitute motion again, where 13, that the intensity of sound applies to all lots, have to be in compliance with the state law, and that the amplified sound will be from 11 PM to 7 AM for the lots listed.
I second that.
So the substitute motion is basically everything that Sonny had, for the exception, we're changing 13 and 14 to what was discussed for wording purposes.
That's what I would propose.
So that was a motion and a second for a substitute motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. That motion carries, and therefore the first motion dies. All right, correct?
Yeah.
5 minutes. Okay. All right, that carries us to item number 18. PJ? Keeping that one straight. Thank you.
Item 18, County Board Report. The Board of Commissioners concurred with the Planning Commission's recommendation from the March 12th, 2018 Planning Commission meeting.
Any questions for the county board report or for PJ concerning it? Seeing none, item 19, items from the public. Anyone from the public like to come forward and? All right, seeing no one coming forward, items from the staff. Comp plan update.
Sure. As you know, Matrix Design Group gave a presentation to the board on Tuesday about their findings from their previous 9 public meetings. They held 3 more this last week, and they're looking to do 3 more in June. They are going to have a draft comprehensive plan available for staff, they said probably in mid-April. What they're looking to do is give a presentation to the Planning Commission in early June. So that you guys can start the ball rolling, because you'll have to vet it at your level before it goes to the board. To make things work properly because of the way the summer is, Matrix is asking if the Planning Commission will entertain the idea of having a special meeting on either Monday, June 4th or Monday, June 5th, because they're looking to have the public meetings that week and host a kind of walk-in public forum here in the building during the board meeting that Thursday, because your meeting's a different day that week.
So they're requesting a meeting on the 4th or the 5th of June?
Correct. And they're looking at it, they're looking at it like a 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. type of meeting.
Do we have our special animal commission committee meeting
It will
scheduled
be
already?
that Monday.
Is it
That's the
already
last scheduled one.
That's the last scheduled one.
Yeah.
And there's no way to rearrange that one, is there? But if it's
Oh,
a
sure.
9 to 2
I mean, it's
meeting, well,
only
I guess we
March.
could.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's only
9
March.
to 2 meeting.
They say it'd take about half a day is what they anticipate.
I don't know if that means you're on that board, Mark. I don't know when your next time
I
on
don't
here.
know either.
I don't. But anybody else?
I don't have it with me.
I'm in July.
You're on in July.
I'm actually tentatively scheduled to be out of town that week for work, but that may change, so don't plan around me.
So their intent is to introduce their recommendations for the new comprehensive plan. They're hoping that you'll hopefully have had it enough time beforehand so that you would make a recommendation that day. If that happens, great, then it'll go to the board sooner. If not, it would be at the Planning Commission level for following meetings until a recommendation is made.
And this will be open to the public too, just like any of our other meetings,
Like
right?
everything else, but this is only for the comp plan.
Only for the comp plan.
Correct.
I mean, right now, I don't see any conflict with my June
That day.
schedule. I can't swear to you, but
Am I done end of June? Right, June's.
Correct. New commissioners, that's another thing. to
They
actually
start
bring
July
up.
1st, right?
Yeah, 2 new commissioners, or anybody who's carrying over, may be here on
Because I'm done.
1st of July.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So there is also another thought, I presented this to Rick too, is to wait until July to do it. Their contract was proposed to have a presentation before the board in June. That was reaching for the stars, but I don't think we're going to make that.
Well, I still think we should do it because you've been here during the bulk of it. If we lose, who's coming off? Bill and Lori? Then you have two new that have to get spun up 100%. And if they haven't been involved in the whole thing, I think still doing it in June would probably be wise.
It's fine.
I mean, just my opinion.
Then you guys can just badmouth us when we're gone.
That was Lori's idea.
You have
I would
some
also
good scapegoats.
I would also think because the planning commissioners are nominated by the board, that anybody who'd be interested would be coming to planning commission meetings.
We would hope.
Yeah, we'd hope.
We would hope. So, all right.
I have travel plans for June 5th through the 20th, so I would not make any of those dates.
So basically June 4th is the number for you.
I can do June 4th.
Okay. Well, then I would make a motion that we have a special meeting on June 4th from 9 to 2, or to cover that. Is that what you're looking for from us today?
You can make a motion. Bylaws allows the chair just to do it within 24 hours if you wanted to, but a motion would be nice.
I will go ahead and make that motion that we plan for a meeting, a special meeting on the 4th of June for the very purpose of
Comprehensive plan
proposal.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? And I guess if we find out the schedules won't, will be affected, then we can either adjust it or cancel it, because I know you said the 5th and you're tentative.
It looks like I'll be in town that
I mean,
day.
if we at least get it on the books, and if something changes, then we go from there. All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
So the other item that they're looking to do with those public meetings, they're looking to be in Wall on that Monday night for their public meeting, and then they're going to skip Tuesday for a public meeting and do Wednesday and Thursday, one in Keystone this time instead of Hill City, and the other one probably at the same Rapid City location. Our Wall and Hill City public meetings, not well attended. We had 3 in Hill City. I think there was 4.5 in Wall is what they counted, and I believe 17 to 20 in Rapid City. So that's it for that one. So
Okay, mineral extraction ordinance, memo.
Sure. So staff is writing a memo to the Board of Commissioners because they've asked us to define a form and structure for a possible committee to cover mineral mining. So staff has been out and talking to other planning agencies and also extraction operators in the state. And we prepared a memo that's most likely going to go before the board at their next meeting. Again, we're not saying that this person or this person or this person needs to be on it, but that someone from this profession needs to be represented, or someone from this area of the county that represents another population needs to be represented. That's what we're coming forward with. And then after that, I assume that the committee will probably be put together the same way every other ordinance committee is by application and then interviews and nominations. But we'll see how that goes.
Any questions?
No questions. I guess I do have a comment. I think I'm going to, BJ, at that meeting, just for so you guys have a little heads up.
I'm sorry?
I'm going to suggest that everybody on the actual committee, the voting members of the committee, all be citizens, and that
Of the county?
of the county, but we just bring in experts for testimony and guidance, as opposed to having anyone in the mining industry sitting on the committee. That it's all citizenry, but you can call in as many professionals as you want to give testimony and guidance. That'll be the direction I'm leaning.
Okay.
Any other comments or questions? All right, items from the membership. Anything from the membership today? Seeing none.
Question.
Yes.
I do have a question for PJ again. If indeed we wind up with a referendum on the previous mining ordinance that we just passed, and it gets voted upon, or actually the referendum happens, they get the petitions, signatures that they need, does that strike the ordinance null and void until the vote, or until the election?
That's my understanding, and then all applications that come in for mining will be under the current existing ordinances.
What I thought.
It's going to
Rick?
be a very.
No, wait, hold on. Hold on a
Oh,
second.
oh,
Hold on a
Michelle's
second.
got
I
some
got the shake.
information.
If adequate number of signatures are acquired and the issue goes to referendum, there's essentially a stay. So between the end of the moratorium and the vote in June, no further applications could be issued because the statute basically says you can't take any action that's contrary to the ordinance itself. So, but then to clarify, if the ordinance would be rejected by the citizens of Pennington County, then mining applications would be issued. We would revert to our old 507B provision with regard to mining permits. And the planning and zoning department would be left considering those applications based upon that one paragraph of criteria.
Not
So-
22 pages.
So let me understand this correctly. If it goes to the vote, the deadline is what day?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. So if they get it on the ballot, I guess they have to turn in their signatures here like real soon, like by tomorrow, right? So if they turn in enough signatures and it goes for referral, that means from tomorrow forward, what does that mean? There's no new applicants that can come in off of the old ordinance or off of the new ordinance. It just essentially extends the moratorium.
Yes.
And then in June, when we have our vote, because is it gonna vote in June, or are we gonna do is it gonna be a special vote?
The way, and I don't have, unfortunately, I don't have the statute in front of me. I certainly may forward that information to all of you, but it would go, the election would be in June because it would be there's 90 days or the next election, scheduled election, so it would be the June election. But it's not even the moratorium would continue. The moratorium would end by operation of law. It's just that under the statute dealing with referendums, essentially it acts as a stay because let's take the reverse argument. Let's say the voters approve Section 320. You can't be approving a mining application between the end of the moratorium and that June vote because we don't know whether the voters are going to approve or reject that.
It's up in the air.
Exactly, and that's why essentially you can't take action that would be contrary to 320 until the vote.
Until the vote. Okay, I just want to make sure I understand how that's gonna unfold and play.
I did prepare a memo on that issue for Ms. Hennies, so if all of you are interested, I'm happy to forward that to you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any further questions for Michelle? Go ahead, Kathy.
Michelle, you know, I don't know, on the statewide ballot measures, there's always these explanations that are on the ballot. On the more local, the countywide, are there explanations like that are written for the ballot? And if so, who writes those?
Yes, there are explanations, and generally, in this instance, would be myself.
Okay.
I've already scheduled time with Ms. Molitor on Thursday that, if necessary, we'll be drafting that explanation because I believe it has to go to print next week, I think Tuesday or Monday, April 2nd.
Okay. All right, very good, thanks.
All right, any further? If not, the last item on the agenda is adjournment. I'd entertain a
Move to
motion.
adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Is there a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
you.